The night Adriana Belmere kneels in broken glass to wrap a bleeding stranger's hand, she doesn't know she's signing her own death warrant. Above her, chandeliers glitter like knives. Around her, Europe's wealthiest predators pretend not to notice the girl hemorrhaging onto white marble. But one man notices everything. Lucien Moretti, young, cold, impossibly dangerous, watches from across the ballroom with eyes that could gut steel. He sees her mercy, her recklessness, the hidden fragment sewn into her coat lining that powerful men have killed for. Within minutes, Adriana is shoved into the back of his armored car, her phone gone, her future sealed behind bulletproof glass. Because her dead father hid something inside religious paintings years ago, evidence that could destroy empires. And Lucien Moretti spent a decade searching for it. If you want to see how far a single act of kindness can drag someone into hell, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The palazzo smelled like old money and expensive lies. Adriana Belmere stood near the back wall of the auction hall, trying to make herself smaller than she already felt. Her black dress was borrowed, her heels pinched. The invitation in her clutch belonged to her employer, Richard Castellano, who'd caught pneumonia 3 days ago and begged her to attend in his place. "Just observe," he'd rasped over the phone. "Take notes. Don't bid on anything. Don't talk to anyone important." She'd agreed because she needed the job, because Richard paid her tuition, because at 26 she was still clawing her way out of Chicago's Little Italy, still trying to prove that a girl who grew up above a butcher shop could restore Renaissance paintings without destroying them. Now she stood in a Venetian palace, surrounded by people who owned countries, and every breath felt like trespassing. The auction room blazed with crystal chandeliers. Frescoed ceilings soared 3 stories high. Servers in white gloves circulated between clusters of men in bespoke suits and women draped in silk that cost more than Adriana's yearly rent. She recognized faces from magazine covers, tech moguls, minor royalty, a Brazilian heiress who'd married into Dutch oil. And then there were the others, the ones whose faces never appeared in magazines. Adriana had learned to spot them during her apprenticeship. They stood differently, spoke less. Their bodyguards didn't try to blend in because they didn't need to. These were the men who made economies collapse with phone calls, who settled disputes with violence so clean it never stained the marble. She stayed near the buffet table, pretending to examine canapes she was too nervous to eat. The first lot went for 1.2 million euros. A Caravaggio study, possibly authentic. Adriana watched the bidding war with professional interest, noting the aggressive posture of the London dealer who eventually won. She scribbled observations in her phone's notepad, trying to look purposeful. Then the room changed. It was subtle at first, a ripple of attention, conversations cutting off mid-sentence, the auctioneer's voice brightening with an edge of fear disguised as respect. Adriana glanced toward the entrance. He walked in like gravity shifted to accommodate him. Young, maybe 30. Tall, lean, carved from something harder than bone. His suit was black and perfectly cut, the kind of tailoring that whispered rather than shouted. Dark hair swept back from a face too sharp to be handsome in any soft way. High cheekbones, mouth like a blade, eyes the color of winter fog, pale and pitiless. But it wasn't his appearance that made the room hold its breath. It was the way power bent toward him without him asking. 2 men flanked him. One was compact and scarred, moving like a weapon waiting for permission. The other was tall and deceptively relaxed, his smile a beautiful warning. Behind them, a woman in midnight blue walked with the predatory grace of someone who'd gutted rivals before breakfast. Adriana didn't need an introduction. Lucien Moretti. She'd heard the name whispered in Richard's studio when clients thought she wasn't listening. Heir to one of Europe's oldest criminal syndicates, a man who inherited an empire built on blood, extortion, and art trafficking before he turned 25. Rumor claimed he'd restructured his father's brutal organization into something colder and infinitely more efficient. He didn't torture. He simply erased. Adriana watched him take a seat in the front row. He didn't acknowledge the men who nodded respectfully as he passed. Didn't smile at the women who adjusted their jewelry and spines. He sat, crossed one leg over the other, and reached into his jacket. The metallic click of a lighter echoed across marble. He didn't light a cigarette, just flicked the silver lighter open and closed. Open, closed. A restless, repetitive sound that somehow commanded more attention than shouting. Adriana forced herself to look away. The auction continued. Another painting. Another round of polite bloodshed disguised as culture. She took notes mechanically, trying to ignore the prickle of awareness crawling up her neck. She lasted 20 minutes before she needed air. The terrace outside was empty and cold. March wind cut through her thin dress, but she gulped it down anyway, gripping the stone balustrade until her knuckles went white. Below, Venice spread out like a jeweled corpse, canals black as ink, bridges lit by lamps that hadn't changed in centuries. She thought about her father. Giovanni Belmare had loved this city. He'd brought her here once when she was 12, before the cancer, before the medical bills that ate their savings, before he died in a VA hospital, holding her hand and whispering about unfinished work. "Promise me something, little restorer," he'd said, his voice already fading. "If anyone ever asks about the paintings, the ones I worked on in the 90s, tell them you don't know. Tell them I was just a conservator, nothing more." She'd promised because he was dying. She'd kept the promise because breaking it felt like desecrating a grave. Adriana pulled her coat tighter. She should go back inside. Richard expected a full report, but her feet wouldn't move. She stared at the water and tried to remember why she'd thought art restoration was a good career choice when most days it felt like glorified janitor work for rich people's egos. Behind her, glass shattered. The sound cracked through the palazzo like a gunshot. Adriana spun and ran back inside. The main hall had erupted into chaos. A waitress stood frozen near the dessert table, her tray overturned at her feet. Crystal littered the floor in 1,000 glittering shards. Champagne spread across white marble like pale blood. The girl's hand was bleeding, a deep gash across her palm where she'd tried to catch a falling glass. No one moved to help. Wealthy guests stepped back, forming a wide circle around the mess. They stared at the girl like she was something distasteful they'd found on expensive shoes. The waitress pressed her bleeding hand against her uniform, her face white with shock and humiliation. "Idiota," someone muttered. The girl flinched. Adriana didn't think. She crossed the room in 4 strides, her heels crunching over broken crystal. She dropped to her knees beside the waitress and reached for her injured hand. "Let me see," Adriana said quietly. The girl stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "Your hand. Let me see it." Trembling, the waitress extended her palm. The cut was deep but clean. No glass embedded, thank God. Blood welled up fast. Adriana unwound the scarf from her neck, the only decent thing she owned, cream silk her mother had given her before she remarried, and moved to Arizona. She wrapped it carefully around the girl's hand, applying pressure. "Keep it elevated," Adriana murmured. "You'll need stitches, but you'll be fine." The waitress's eyes filled with tears. "Grazie," she whispered. "Grazie mille." Adriana helped her stand. Around them, the crowd remained frozen, silent, judging. She could feel their eyes like insects crawling over her skin, and then she felt something worse. A gaze that didn't judge. It dissected. She looked up. Lucien Moretti stood 10 feet away, perfectly still, his pale eyes locked on her face. He'd stopped in the middle of leaving, his coat already on, his hand arrested halfway to his pocket. The silver lighter caught the chandelier light. Their eyes met across shattered glass and blood-stained marble. Adriana's breath stopped. He studied her with the intensity of someone examining a weapon they hadn't known existed. Not with lust, not with curiosity, with calculation, like she was a problem requiring immediate solution. The moment stretched too long. Then his mouth curved, barely, a movement so slight it might have been imagined. He turned and walked toward the exit. Adriana exhaled. The waitress squeezed her wrist. "You should go," she whispered urgently, "before someone important notices." Too late, Adriana thought. She helped the girl toward the service entrance where other staff waited with a first aid kit. By the time she returned to the main hall, the broken crystal had been swept away. The auction had resumed. Everything returned to expensive normalcy, as if mercy was an embarrassing interruption quickly forgotten. Adriana collected her coat from the check room. Outside, the night had turned colder. She walked quickly toward the Vaporetto stop, her cheap heels clicking against stone. The canal water looked black and uninviting. Fog crept between buildings like something hunting. She made it halfway across the bridge before the car pulled up beside her. Black. armored. Windows tinted so dark they reflected nothing. The back door opened. A man emerged. Not Lucien, the scarred one who'd flanked him earlier. Compact, deadly. His smile was polite and utterly terrifying. "Miss Belmere," he said in accented English. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence." Adriana's heart stopped. "I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake." He gestured toward the open door. "Please." "I'd rather not." The smile didn't change. "That wasn't a request." Adriana looked around. The bridge was empty. The nearest cafe was closed. Fog swallowed the streetlights. She could scream, but Venice at midnight didn't care about screaming. She got in the car. The door closed behind her with a sound like a vault ceiling. The interior was all black leather and bulletproof glass. Lucien Moretti sat across from her, one leg crossed over the other, the silver lighter turning between his fingers. Up close, he looked even more dangerous, sharper, like someone had taken a classical sculpture and filed away everything soft. The scarred man slid into the driver's seat. The woman in midnight blue sat beside him. The car pulled away from the curb with terrifying smoothness. Lucien didn't speak. Adriana's pulse hammered against her ribs. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere we can talk." "We could talk here, in public, with witnesses." His mouth twitched. "I prefer privacy. I prefer not being kidnapped." "You're not kidnapped." He flicked the lighter. Open. Closed. "You're accepting a ride." "Under duress." "Under protection." Adriana laughed, a sharp, slightly hysterical sound. "Protection from what?" "From the consequences of what you're carrying." The air left her lungs. Lucien's pale eyes didn't blink. "Your coat. Inside lining. Left side. Something was sewn in recently. Poorly. The stitches don't match the garment's original construction." Adriana's hand moved instinctively toward her coat. She stopped herself, but not fast enough. Lucien's expression didn't change. "I'm going to ask you a question, Miss Belmere. I suggest you answer honestly. Lies bore me, and boredom makes me impatient." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Your father?" "Giovanni Belmere, art conservator. Worked extensively in northern Italy during the mid-90s, died 6 years ago in Chicago. Medical bankruptcy. You inherited nothing except his tools and a storage unit full of damaged paintings no gallery wanted." Adriana's blood turned to ice. "How do you—" "I know everything worth knowing." He leaned forward slightly. "What I don't know is why you're carrying a coded fragment inside your coat that connects to financial records hidden inside religious artwork my organization paid your father to restore 20 years ago." The world tilted. "That's insane," Adriana whispered. "Is it?" Lucien's voice was soft, reasonable, more terrifying than shouting. "Your father hid ledgers inside paintings, routes, names, transactions, evidence linking politicians, bankers, and crime families to murder, extortion, arms trafficking. He was a very talented man, also very stupid. Because when you hide secrets for people like me, you don't get to retire quietly." Adriana's hands shook. "My father restored art. That's all." "Your father," Lucien said, "helped my family hide evidence inside masterpieces, and then he helped our enemies steal it. That's a lie." "Then explain the fragment." "What fragment? I don't have—" "Empty your coat. Now." Adriana stared at him. His expression was carved from stone. Merciless, absolutely certain. She wanted to refuse. But the scarred man's hand had drifted toward his jacket. The woman turned slightly in the front seat, her posture casual and lethal. With shaking fingers, Adriana reached into her coat's inner lining. She felt it immediately. A seam she'd never noticed before. Stitches that didn't match the rest. Something small and flat hidden beneath the fabric. No, her father wouldn't have. She tore the stitching open. A folded piece of heavy paper slid into her palm. Old, yellowed, covered in tiny handwritten notations, numbers, coordinates, initials. At the bottom, a symbol she recognized from her childhood. Her father's personal mark, the one he stamped onto restoration certificates. Her vision blurred. "When did you last wear that coat?" Lucien asked quietly. "It was his." The words came out broken. "My father's. I had it altered after he died. I've worn it 100 times. I didn't know. Oh, someone else did." Adriana looked up. "What?" Lucien's gaze hadn't softened. Your employer, Richard Castellano, he sent you to that auction specifically. Why? He's sick. Pneumonia. He asked me to observe. He's not sick. He's hiding. The car turned onto a private road. Gates opened automatically. They drove through manicured gardens toward a villa that looked like it had been standing since the Renaissance. Adriana's thoughts spun uselessly. Richard had called her 3 days ago, coughing, insistent she attend the auction in his place. He'd even arranged her invitation, her dress, her transportation. He'd made sure she wore the coat. No, she breathed. Lucien watched her understanding arrive. Richard Castellano has been selling information to my enemies for 5 years. He knew you'd wear your father's coat. He knew I'd be at that auction. And he knew I'd notice. Notice what? You. Lucien's voice dropped. Helping that girl. Drawing attention. Making yourself memorable. So when my people investigated, they'd find exactly what Castellano wanted us to find. Adriana shook her head violently. That's insane. Richard wouldn't. He already has. And now you're holding evidence that powerful people have killed for. Lucien leaned back. Which means, Miss Belmere, you have 2 choices. You can cooperate with me, help me decode what your father hid, and possibly survive. Or you can refuse, and I'll deliver you to the men who've been hunting this fragment for 2 decades. That's not a choice. No, Lucien agreed. It's not. The car stopped in front of the villa. The woman opened Adriana's door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of cypress and dark water. Adriana didn't move. What happened to my father? For the first time, something flickered across Lucien's face. Not quite sympathy, but close. He tried to expose what he'd helped create, Lucien said quietly. He failed, and the people he betrayed made sure he died slowly enough to regret it. Adriana's entire body went numb. Cancer, she whispered. The doctor said it was cancer. Lucien said nothing, which was answer enough. Adriana stepped out of the car on legs that barely held her weight. She stood in front of a fortress disguised as beauty, holding a fragment of paper that had already cost her everything she thought she knew about her father. Behind her, Lucien emerged from the car. He didn't touch her, didn't offer empty comfort. Inside, he said, we have work to do. Adriana looked at this villa, at the armed guards stationed discreetly near the entrance, at the gates closing behind her with a sound like finality. Then she looked at the fragment in her hand, her father's handwriting, her father's mark, her father's secrets. And beneath the grief and terror, something else sparked to life. Rage. Show me, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Show me what he hid. Lucien's pale eyes gleamed in the darkness. Follow me. The villa's interior smelled like leather, old wood, and something darker Adriana couldn't name. Power, maybe. Or blood that had been scrubbed from marble so many times the stone remembered. Lucien led her through hallways lined with Renaissance paintings worth more than most people earned in lifetimes. Their footsteps echoed against floors so polished they reflected the ceiling frescoes overhead. Armed guards stood at every corner, their faces blank, their hands never far from concealed weapons. No one spoke. The woman in midnight blue walked ahead, her heels clicking a rhythm that sounded like countdown. The scarred man followed behind Adriana, close enough that she felt his presence like heat against her spine. They descended a stone staircase that curved into the villa's foundation. The air grew colder, older. Adriana's breath misted in front of her face. At the bottom, Lucien pushed open a heavy wooden door. Inside was a workshop. Adriana stopped breathing. The room stretched at least 40 feet, with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with climate-controlled glass cases. Restoration tools covered every surface. Brushes, solvents, UV lamps, magnification equipment. Paintings in various stages of conservation hung on easels or lay flat on examination tables. The setup was professional, expensive, obsessive, and familiar. Too familiar. My father worked here, Adriana whispered. For 7 years. Lucien moved to the center table where a painting lay under harsh examination lights. He was the best conservator my family ever employed, meticulous, discreet. He understood that some artwork required special care. Adriana walked slowly into the room, her fingers trailing over tools she recognized. A specific type of scalpel her father preferred. Pigment samples arranged exactly the way he'd taught her. Even the smell, linseed oil, aged varnish, turpentine, was exactly like his Chicago studio before he got too sick to work. "What did you make him do?" Her voice cracked. Lucian lifted the painting on the examination table, a Madonna and Child, 16th century, beautiful and serene. He turned it over. The back panel had been altered. Adriana saw it immediately with her trained eye. Someone had carefully removed the original wooden support, hollowed out a shallow compartment, then resealed it so perfectly that even experts would miss it under casual inspection. "Financial ledgers," Lucian said. "Account numbers. Transaction routes. Names of every politician, banker, and crime family my father did business with across 3 decades. Your father hid them inside religious artwork we donated to museums, private collections, even basilicas. Dozens of paintings, scattered across Europe." He set the painting down. "We trusted him. He betrayed us." Adriana's hands clenched. "You used him. You forced him to—" "We paid him extremely well. He accepted. And when he tried to stop?" Lucian's pale eyes locked onto hers. "He didn't try to stop, Miss Belmere. He tried to sell the evidence to our enemies, to Vittorio De Luca." The name meant nothing to Adriana. Lucian saw her confusion. De Luca controls Naples, Sicily, and half of Rome's government contracts. He built his empire by destroying mine. 20 years ago, he orchestrated a massacre that killed 17 members of my extended family, including my sister. His voice didn't change, didn't rise or crack, but something in the air grew sharp enough to cut. She was 9 years old. Adriana pressed her hand against the examination table to stay upright. "Your father," Lucian continued, "collected evidence against my family for years. Then he contacted De Luca and offered to sell it. Location of every hidden ledger, every compromised politician, every financial route we used to move money through legitimate channels. He was going to hand De Luca everything he needed to burn our organization to the ground." "Why would he?" "Because my father threatened to kill him if he didn't continue the work. And your father, despite his talents, was a coward." The word landed like a slap. Adriana's rage flared white-hot. "Don't you dare! He chose to betray us instead of dying with integrity. That's cowardice. You gave him an impossible choice. Everyone faces impossible choices, Miss Belmere. Character is what you do when they arrive." Adriana wanted to hit him, wanted to scream. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, to think, to not fall apart in front of this man who watched her like a predator assessing prey. "If my father tried to sell you out," she said slowly, "why am I still alive?" "Because he failed. My people intercepted his communication with De Luca before the exchange happened. But your father had already hidden the evidence too well. We recovered most of the paintings, extracted most of the ledgers, but not all." Lucian pulled the fragment from his pocket, the one she'd been carrying unknowingly. "This is a key. Coordinates and codes telling us which paintings still contain hidden compartments, and which ones De Luca already found." He placed it on the table between them. "Your father died before we could make him talk. Cancer, yes. But cancer we made sure spread faster than nature intended." Adriana's stomach turned. "You poisoned him. We accelerated the inevitable. You're a monster." Lucian's expression didn't change. "Yes, but I'm the monster keeping you alive right now, because the moment De Luca learns you exist, that Giovanni Belmere's daughter is still breathing, he'll do worse than poison. He'll take you apart piece by piece until you give him what he thinks you know." "I don't know anything." "He won't believe that." The door opened. The scarred man entered, followed by 2 others. One was tall and moved with deceptive laziness, his expensive suit tailored to hide the weapon at his spine. The other was older, gray-haired, with eyes that had watched too much and stopped caring decades ago. "Nico," Lucian said to the scarred man. "Marco," a nod to the tall one. "Victor." They formed a loose semicircle, studying Adriana like doctors examining symptoms. Marco spoke first, his accent thick and his smile sharper than his cheekbones. "This is the conservator's daughter? She looks scared." "She should be," Nico said. Victor said nothing, just stared. The woman in midnight blue appeared in the doorway. "Background check is complete. She's clean. No criminal record, no suspicious associations. Works 3 jobs to pay off her father's medical debt. Lives in a studio apartment in Logan Square. No boyfriend, no close friends. No one who'd notice if she disappeared. Celine, Lucien said. Summary. The woman, Celine, crossed her arms. She's a liability. DeLuca has people watching the auction house. They'll know she was there. They'll know she left with you. By morning, they'll have her entire life mapped out, and by tomorrow night, they'll have operatives in Chicago tearing apart her apartment. Adriana's knees weakened. My apartment is already compromised, Celine finished. I had our people clear it 2 hours ago. Your landlord thinks you're on vacation. Your employers received resignation emails. Your phone is currently transmitting location data from a train heading to Munich. You can't just... We already did. Adriana turned to Lucien. You had no right. I had every right. You became my responsibility the moment you touched that fragment. I didn't ask for this. Neither did my sister when DeLuca's men walked into her school. His voice stayed level, lethal. But she died screaming anyway, so forgive me if I'm not particularly concerned about your privacy. The room fell silent. Adriana's chest heaved. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed in front of these people. Marco whistled low. She's got fire. I like her. Shut up, Marco, Nico muttered. Lucien ignored them both. He moved to a cabinet and retrieved a leather-bound folder. Inside are photographs of 37 paintings your father worked on between 1993 and 2000. Most we've recovered. 8 are still missing. Using the fragments' codes, you're going to tell me which ones contain hidden compartments and where to find them. He dropped the folder in front of Adriana. She stared at it. I don't know how to decode this. You're a trained conservator. You know your father's techniques. You'll figure it out. And if I refuse... Lucien leaned against the table, close enough that she smelled expensive cologne and gunpowder. Then I'll let Celine explain what DeLuca does to people he wants information from. She witnessed it personally. It took 3 days. The victim was still conscious when they started removing organs. Adriana's stomach lurched. Celine's expression didn't flicker. He was my brother. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Adriana looked at each of them. Nico's scarred face, Marco's dangerous smile, Victor's dead eyes, Celine's perfect, terrible composure. And Lucien, watching her with the patience of something that had already decided how this ended. These weren't just criminals. They were survivors of something that had carved away everything soft and left only edges. Fine, Adriana whispered. I'll help you. Smart girl, Marco said. Lucien straightened. Nico, Victor, increase security. I want surveillance on every property DeLuca owns in northern Italy. Celine, coordinate with our contacts in Rome. Find out if DeLuca knows about tonight. Already done, Celine said. He knows. His people identified her leaving the auction with us. Then we're on the clock. They filed out, leaving Adriana alone with Lucien and the folder full of her father's secrets. She opened it with shaking hands. The photographs were professional, high resolution, each painting labeled with acquisition date, current location, and condition notes. She recognized several immediately, works she'd studied in art history courses, pieces hanging in prestigious museums. All of them touched by her father's hands, all of them potentially hiding evidence that could destroy governments. Start with this one. Lucien pointed to a Madonna hanging in the Uffizi. DeLuca tried to steal it 5 years ago. His team got caught, but I never understood why he wanted something we'd already cleared. Adriana studied the photograph, then the fragment. The numbers and symbols suddenly clicked into focus like a puzzle she'd been solving her whole life without knowing. It's not just coordinates, she breathed. It's a restoration log. Dates, techniques, materials used. But some of the entries are wrong. Pigments that weren't available in the 16th century, varnish types that didn't exist. He's marking which paintings still have compartments by listing impossible materials. Lucien went very still. Show me. She pointed. Here. Cadmium red restoration, 1997. Cadmium red wasn't widely used until the 19th century. A real conservator would never claim it for Renaissance work. It's a flag. This painting still has something hidden. Where's it now? Adriana checked the notes. Private collection? Florence. Owned by... Her voice died. Who? Senator Alessandro Trentino. Lucian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Our favorite politician. You know him? He's been laundering DeLuca's money through real estate development for a decade. We've been trying to prove it. If that painting contains the evidence I think it does, you can destroy him. We can destroy their entire operation. Adriana looked at the photograph. At the serene Madonna cradling an infant, gold leaf glowing against centuries-old paint. Beneath that beauty, her father had hidden documentation of murder, corruption, and stolen fortunes. He tried to do the right thing, she said quietly. In the end, that's why he contacted DeLuca, not to betray you, to expose everyone. Lucien's expression darkened. The right thing would have been refusing the work in the first place. You would have killed him. Probably. Then you gave him the same impossible choice you're giving me. No, Miss Belmere, your father chose money over morality for 7 years before his conscience caught up. You're choosing survival. There's a difference. Is there? Lucien didn't answer. They worked through the night. Adriana decoded the fragment while Lucien made phone calls in Italian, too rapid for her to follow. Victor brought coffee that tasted like gasoline. Marco appeared periodically with updates about DeLuca's movements, warehouses being emptied, shipments rerouted, soldiers mobilizing across 3 cities. He's preparing for war, Marco said around 3 a.m. Let him, Lucien replied. By dawn, Adriana had identified all 8 missing paintings. 3 were in private collections, 2 in museum storage, 1 in a monastery outside Siena. The last 2 had been sold to unknown buyers through auction houses that no longer existed. The monastery painting is closest, Celine said, studying a map spread across the examination table. 2 hours by car. But if DeLuca knows we're looking, he'll have it watched. He's already watching everything, Nico said. Difference is whether we move first or wait for him to. Lucien stared at the map. At the monastery marked with a red pin. We move today. Adriana comes with us. Bad idea, Celine said flatly. She's the only one who can extract the compartment without destroying the painting. Museum security will notice if we damage a masterpiece. Then we steal it first, work on it here. Too slow. DeLuca's people are faster. Adriana's exhaustion finally broke through her fear. I'm standing right here. Maybe ask me what I think. Everyone looked at her. I think, she continued, her voice steadier than she felt, that if my father spent 7 years helping you hide evidence and another 2 trying to expose it, the least I can do is finish what he started. So yes, I'll go. I'll open the compartment. But afterward, you let me walk away. Lucien's pale eyes didn't blink. That's not how this works. Then we don't have a deal. You don't get to negotiate, Miss Belmere. You're alive because I allow it. And you get what you want because I'm cooperating. Sounds like negotiation to me. Marco laughed. Actually laughed. I really do like her. Nico looked like he wanted to shoot something. Selena's expression remained unreadable. Lucien stepped closer. Close enough that Adriana had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He smelled like expensive cologne and something darker. Dangerous. After this is over, he said quietly, DeLuca will hunt you for the rest of your life. You'll never be safe. Never sleep without fear. Never trust anyone who gets close. Walking away doesn't save you. It just means you'll die alone instead of protected. I've been alone my whole life. I'm used to it. Something flickered across his face. Not quite sympathy, but recognition. We leave in 2 hours, he said. Get some sleep. Where? Celine will show you to a room. The woman appeared at Adriana's elbow like she'd been summoned. This way. They climbed back through the villa in silence. Celine led her to a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Silk sheets, antique furniture, windows overlooking Lake Como as dawn light turned the water silver. Bathroom's through there, Celine said. Clothes in the closet should fit. Don't try to leave. Guards are everywhere and they're not polite. Adriana stood in the middle of the room, too exhausted to process beauty. Why are you helping him? Selena paused in the doorway. I'm not helping him. I'm surviving him. There's a difference. He said DeLuca killed your brother. DeLuca killed my brother after Lucien's father made a deal that left him exposed. So I destroyed Lucien's father, took over operations, and rebuilt this organization into something that doesn't sacrifice people for profit. Now DeLuca wants revenge for old insults, And Lucien wants justice for his sister. And I want both of them dead so I can finally sleep without a gun under my pillow." She smiled. It was the saddest thing Adriana had ever seen. "We're all trapped, Miss Belmere, just in different cages." The door closed. Adriana stood alone in borrowed luxury, still wearing her blood-stained dress from the auction. She walked to the window and looked out at the lake. Fog clung to the water. Mountains rose in the distance. It was beautiful the way a postcard was beautiful, perfect and utterly unreachable. She thought about running, about stealing clothes and slipping past the guards, and disappearing into whatever life she could scrape together on the run. But Lucien was right. DeLuca would find her, and when he did, she'd die badly. At least here, she had a chance. At least here, she could finish what her father started. Adriana pulled off the ruined dress and stepped into the shower. Water scalded her skin. She scrubbed until her flesh turned red, trying to wash away the feeling of too many eyes, too many secrets, too much blood. When she finally emerged, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Black pants, black sweater, boots that actually fit. Someone had been watching, measuring, preparing. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it just made her tired. She lay down on the silk sheets and stared at the ceiling. Sleep came in fragments, nightmares about her father's face, about cancer that spread too fast, about men in expensive suits who hid murder inside art. She woke to knocking. 10 minutes? Nico's voice called through the door. Adriana dressed quickly. Her hands shook as she tied the boots. In the mirror, she looked like someone else, someone harder. The girl who restored paintings in a Chicago studio felt like a memory already fading. Downstairs, they were waiting. Lucien wore black tactical gear that made him look even more lethal. Nico and Marco were similarly dressed. Cellini carried a laptop bag and a very professional disinterest. Victor wasn't present. "Where is he?" Adriana asked. "Coordinating backup," Lucien said. "If things go wrong, we'll need extraction." Comforting. Marco grinned. "Don't worry, little conservator. We're very good at not dying." They loaded into 2 armored SUVs. Adriana rode with Lucien and Celine. Nico drove. The vehicle smelled like leather and gun oil. The road to Siena cut through Tuscan hills that rolled like frozen waves, vineyards, olive groves, stone farmhouses that had stood for centuries. Everything looked peaceful, civilized. But Adriana felt the tension coiled inside the vehicle like a living thing. "DeLuca knows we're coming," Celine said, checking her phone. "His people are already at the monastery, 3 vehicles, maybe 8 men." "More than expected," Nico muttered. "He's desperate," Lucien said. "Good. Desperation makes people sloppy." Adriana gripped her seat. "What exactly is the plan here?" "We go in. You extract the compartment. We leave." "That's not a plan. That's a grocery list." Marco's voice crackled through the radio from the second vehicle. "I like her more every minute." "Focus!" Lucien snapped. They drove another 20 minutes in silence. The monastery appeared on a hilltop, ancient stone walls rising above cypress trees. Beautiful, serene, exactly the kind of place that should house priceless art, not a battlefield. But Adriana saw the black SUVs parked near the entrance, saw men in suits that didn't quite hide weapons, saw the way they moved, too alert, too coordinated. "They're not even hiding," she whispered. "They don't need to," Lucien said. "This is a message. DeLuca wants us to know he's here, wants us to back down." "Will you?" He looked at her. "What do you think?" Nico stopped the vehicle 50 yards from the monastery gates. The second SUV pulled alongside. Marco and 2 other men emerged, weapons visible now, professionalism replacing bravado. Lucien opened his door. "Stay in the car." "Like hell," Adriana said. "This isn't—" "You need me to open the compartment, so either I come in or this whole thing is pointless." Celine made a sound that might have been approval. Lucien's jaw tightened. "Stay behind me. Don't speak. Don't move unless I tell you." They approached the monastery gates as a group. DeLuca's men moved to intercept. The leader was tall, silver-haired, with a face that had forgotten how to smile decades ago. "Moretti, you're trespassing." "It's a monastery. It's open to the public." "Not today. I have business inside." "So do we." They faced each other like chess pieces waiting for the first move. Then Lucien smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Adriana had ever seen. Cold. Perfectly controlled. The smile of someone who'd calculated exactly how much blood would spill and decided the cost was acceptable. "Tell DeLuca," Lucian said quietly, "that if he wanted the painting, he should have moved faster. It belongs to me now." "You haven't taken it yet." "Haven't I?" Confusion flickered across the silver-haired man's face. That's when the explosion hit. Not large, not destructive. Just enough to shatter windows on the monastery's north wing and send smoke billowing into the morning air. Chaos erupted. DeLuca's men spun toward the explosion. Monastery bells began ringing. Monks appeared in doorways, shouting in Italian. Lucien grabbed Adriana's arm and ran. They sprinted through the gates while DeLuca's people were distracted. Nico and Marco flanked them, weapons drawn. Celine had already disappeared toward the chapel. "Where's the painting?" Lucien shouted. "Chapel of San Marco," Adriana gasped. "East wing." They ran through ancient corridors while smoke alarms shrieked. Adriana's heart slammed against her ribs. Behind them, she heard shouting. Gunfire. Lucien kicked open the chapel doors. Inside, serene light filtered through stained glass. Pews stood empty. And on the far wall, mounted above the altar, hung the Madonna. Her father's work. Her father's secrets. Adriana ran forward. "I need tools. Something to remove the back panel without damaging—" "No time." Lucien pulled a knife from his belt. "You can't just—" "We have maybe 60 seconds before they regroup. Work fast." Adriana grabbed the knife. Her hands shook. She climbed onto the altar, reaching for the painting's frame. The back panel was sealed with centuries-old nails and her father's careful reconstruction. She worked the blade under the edge. Wood splintered. "Careful," she hissed at herself. Footsteps pounded in the corridor outside. Nico appeared in the doorway. "We've got company!" Gunfire erupted. Bullets punched through the chapel's wooden doors. Stained glass exploded. Colored light shattered across marble. Adriana kept working. The panel came loose. She pulled it away, revealing the hollowed compartment beneath. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a ledger. She grabbed it. "Got it!" Lucien was beside her instantly. He pulled her off the altar as bullets tore through the space where she'd been standing. They hit the floor hard. He covered her body with his, and for one impossible moment, Adriana felt his heartbeat slamming against her spine. Then he was moving, dragging her toward a side exit while Nico and Marco returned fire. The chapel filled with smoke and noise and the smell of gunpowder. They burst into a cloister, ran through gardens where monks grew vegetables and prayed for peace. The ledger pressed against Adriana's ribs like burning proof. More gunfire. Marco went down. Adriana screamed, but he rolled, came up firing, his grin bloody and completely insane. "I'm fine. Just a scratch." They reached the vehicles. Celine already had the engine running. "Go!" Lucien shouted. They piled inside. Tires screamed against gravel. Bullets sparked off armored plating. The monastery disappeared behind them as they rocketed down the hillside. No one spoke. Adriana pressed her hand against her mouth, trying not to vomit. Marco was laughing in the back seat, blood streaming from a grazed shoulder. "That was fun. Let's do it again." "You're insane," Adriana whispered. Finally, she understands. Lucien opened the oilcloth package with careful hands. The ledger inside was old, handwritten, meticulous. Pages and pages of accounts, dates, transactions, names highlighted, amounts circled, evidence connecting DeLuca to murders spanning 2 decades, including coordinates for where they buried the bodies. "Your father," Lucien said quietly, "was a very thorough man." Adriana stared at her father's handwriting, at the care he'd taken documenting evil, at the risk he'd accepted trying to expose it. "He was trying to be brave," she whispered. "At the end, he was trying to fix what he'd done." Lucien closed the ledger. "Bravery doesn't erase complicity." "Maybe not, but it's something." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since the auction, his expression softened into something almost human. "Yes," he said, "it's something." They drove in silence while adrenaline drained from Adriana's system and left her hollow. She watched the Tuscan countryside blur past, beautiful and indifferent. Her phone was gone. Her apartment was cleared. Her life in Chicago had been erased like it never existed, and she was trapped inside a war she didn't start, carrying her father's sins toward an ending she couldn't see. Celine's phone rang. She answered, listened. Her face went white. "We have a problem." Lucian tensed. "What kind?" "Victor's dead. They found him an hour ago, tortured. And the safe house we were headed to, it's been compromised. DeLuca's people are waiting there." "He knew," Nico said from the driver's seat. "The whole time he knew our movements." Marco stopped laughing. Lucien's voice dropped to something barely human. "We have a traitor." The words hung in the air like poison. Adriana watched their faces change, watched suspicion bloom like rot, watched years of trust crack under the weight of betrayal. "Who knew the route?" Celine asked. "Everyone," Nico said. "The entire inner circle." They looked at each other, at Adriana, and she understood with horrible clarity that she'd just become the most dangerous person in the vehicle, because if there was a traitor among them, an outsider was the perfect suspect. Lucian's hand moved toward his weapon. "Don't," Adriana whispered. His pale eyes met hers, cold, calculating, deciding whether she was worth the risk. "Please," she said, "I didn't—" The vehicle's window exploded inward. Glass exploded inward in a spray of crystalline shrapnel that caught the morning light like diamonds before embedding into leather, skin, and bone. Adriana didn't scream. Her throat locked around air that suddenly tasted like copper and gasoline. The armored SUV swerved violently as Nico's head snapped sideways, blood blooming across his temple where a shard had carved through flesh. The second shot punched through the rear windshield. Marco threw himself over Adriana, his weight crushing the air from her lungs. She felt his heartbeat against her spine. Too fast, too hard. The rhythm of a man who'd learned to measure life in seconds. "Sniper!" Celine's voice cut through the chaos. "Northeast ridge, 800 meters. Lucian's hand shot out, grabbing Nico's shoulder before the driver could slump forward onto the wheel. "Stay conscious. We need you driving." "Trying," Nico gasped. Blood sheeted down his face, turning his vision red. The SUV fishtailed across gravel as he fought to keep control with one hand while pressing the other against his torn scalp. Another shot. This one sparked off the reinforced frame inches from where Celine's head had been a heartbeat earlier. "They're hurting us," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "3 more vehicles closing from the west. They're pushing us toward the valley road." "The bridge," Marco muttered against Adriana's ear. "They're forcing us to the bridge." Adriana couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The ledger pressed against her ribs like accusation, like proof that everything she touched turned to blood. Lucien pulled his phone. "Victor, respond. Victor." He stopped, looked at Celine. "He's not answering." "Because he's dead," Celine said. "I told you. They found him 2 hours ago." "You told us that 30 seconds before the window exploded." Lucien's voice dropped to something sub-zero. "Interesting timing." The temperature in the vehicle plummeted. Celine's hand moved toward her laptop bag, toward whatever weapon she kept there. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm observing facts." "Observe this. I've bled for this organization longer than you've been alive. While you were learning to tie your shoes, I was cleaning up your father's messes. Don't you dare question my loyalty now." "Then explain how DeLuca knew our route, knew our safe house, knew exactly where to position a sniper. Maybe ask your new pet conservator." Selena's eyes cut to Adriana. "The one who appeared out of nowhere carrying evidence we've been hunting for 20 years, the one whose father sold us out to DeLuca. Bloodlines run deep, Lucien. You should remember that." Adriana finally found her voice. "I didn't—" "Shut up." Lucien didn't look at her. His pale eyes stayed locked on Celine. "You cleared her background yourself. Backgrounds can be manufactured. So can loyalty." The accusation hung between them like drawn steel. Marco shifted his weight off Adriana slowly. His hand stayed near his weapon. "This is bad. This is very bad." Nico made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been dying. The SUV's speed climbed past 90. Trees blurred into smears of green. The valley road appeared ahead, narrow, winding, carved into the hillside with a drop that promised nothing but impact and gravity. And in the distance, exactly where Marco predicted, The bridge stretched across a gorge like a concrete scar. "They're going to hit us on the bridge," Adriana whispered. "Yes," Lucien said. "They are." He pulled his weapon, checked the magazine with movements so practiced they looked like meditation. "Celine, give me your phone." "No, that wasn't a request. And I'm not your subordinate. I'm your partner. Or did you forget who rebuilt this organization after your father burned it to ash?" Lucien moved faster than thought. One moment he was across the vehicle. The next, the barrel of his gun pressed against Celine's temple, cold metal against her perfect composure. "Your phone, now." Celine smiled. It was the saddest, most broken thing Adriana had ever seen. "You really think I'd betray you? After everything?" "I think everyone betrays everyone eventually. It's just a matter of price." "Then you've already lost." Marco made a small, desperate sound. "Boss, we're 30 seconds from the bridge." Lucien's fingers stayed on the trigger. His hand didn't shake. "Phone, last chance." Celine reached into her jacket slowly, pulled out her phone, handed it over. Lucien grabbed it with his free hand, eyes never leaving her face. He scrolled through recent calls, messages, location data. His expression didn't change, but something in the vehicle shifted, like air pressure dropping before a storm. "Nico," Lucien said quietly, "stop the car." "We're about to be—" "Stop the car." Nico slammed the brakes. The SUV shrieked to a halt in the middle of the valley road. Behind them, 3 black vehicles appeared around the curve, closing fast. Ahead, the bridge waited. Lucien showed Celine the phone screen. "Explain this." Adriana couldn't see what it displayed, but she saw Celine's face go absolutely still. "I can't. Try. You won't believe me." "Probably not, but I'm interested in watching you lie." Celine looked at Marco, at Nico bleeding in the driver's seat, at Adriana still pressed against the floor where Marco had thrown her. Then back to Lucien. "It's not what you think. You've been in contact with DeLuca's people for 6 months. The phone doesn't lie. The phone doesn't know context. Then enlighten me." The pursuing vehicles were 200 meters away, 150. Their engines roared like mechanical hunger. "I was gathering intelligence," Celine said, "playing double agent, feeding DeLuca false information so we could—" "Without telling me." "You were too close to it, too emotional about your sister. I needed someone thinking clearly." Lucien's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. "So you decided to betray me for my own good. How noble." "I didn't betray you." "Then why is Victor dead? Why are we being ambushed? Why does DeLuca know everything we're doing before we do it?" "Because there's another traitor." Celine's voice finally cracked. "Someone else feeding him information. Someone in your inner circle that even I couldn't identify. So I started my own investigation, pretended to work with DeLuca's people to find out who—" The bullet came through the side window, not from the sniper, from one of the pursuing vehicles. It caught Nico in the throat. Blood sprayed across the dashboard, the steering wheel, Adriana's face. Nico made a wet, choking sound. His hand scrabbled at his neck, trying to hold together what the bullet had torn apart. His eyes found Lucien's in the rearview mirror, desperate, terrified, already dimming. Then he slumped forward. Dead. Marco screamed. Actually screamed. A sound of pure rage and grief that didn't belong in a human throat. He kicked open his door and started firing. Adriana's ears exploded with noise, gunfire, shattering glass. Marco's voice howling something in Italian that sounded like prayers or curses or both. The pursuing vehicles scattered. One spun out. Another returned fire. Bullets punched through metal. Lucien grabbed Adriana and hauled her out of the SUV. "Run!" "Where?" "The bridge. Now!" They ran. Celine followed, her laptop bag clutched against her chest. Behind them, Marco kept firing, his silhouette black against muzzle flashes and morning light, providing cover, buying seconds with bullets. Adriana's boots slipped on gravel. Lucien's grip on her arm was the only thing keeping her upright. They hit the bridge running, their footsteps echoing off concrete that stretched across empty air. Below, the gorge dropped 300 feet to rocks and white water. Halfway across, Lucien stopped, turned, raised his weapon towards Celine. "Don't move." Celine froze. Lucien, you had 6 months to tell me about your investigation. 6 months to warn me there was another traitor. Instead, you hid it, orchestrated secret meetings, built an entire operation behind my back. His voice stayed level, dead. That's not intelligence gathering. That's planning a coup. You're wrong. Prove it. Open the laptop bag. There's nothing. Open it, or I will. Behind them, gunfire intensified. Marco's weapon went silent. Either he was reloading or he was dead. Celine's hands shook as she unzipped the bag. Inside was a laptop, expected, and underneath, wrapped in cloth, a second ledger. Adriana's breath stopped. Lucien moved closer, weapon steady. What is that? Insurance, Celine whispered. Against what? Against you. Against DeLuca. Against everyone who thinks loyalty means blind obedience. She pulled out the ledger with careful hands. Your father kept records too. Every order he gave, every person he had killed, every child he orphaned building this empire, including mine. The confession shattered something in the air. My parents, Celine continued, her voice hollow, worked for your father. They were loyal, they were faithful, and when they witnessed something they shouldn't have, when they saw him execute a federal prosecutor in cold blood, he killed them, made it look like a car accident. I was 16. Lucien's weapon didn't waver. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to. Your father hid it perfectly. But I found proof, kept it, and when he died and you took over, I stayed because I wanted to see if you'd be different, if you'd actually build something better than the blood empire you inherited. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure I could trust you. Because men like your father raise sons in their image. Because I needed leverage in case you turned out exactly like him. Tears tracked down her face. Perfect, terrible, silent. But you didn't, she whispered. You actually tried. You restructured, eliminated the trafficking, reduced the violence, started moving toward legitimate business. You became what I hoped for but didn't believe possible, so I kept helping, kept protecting, kept this ledger hidden because I wanted to believe in you. Lucien's hand finally shook. Then why contact DeLuca? Because someone in your organization is selling information, someone close, and they're doing it to DeLuca specifically, which means they want him to destroy you. I couldn't investigate openly without tipping them off, so I pretended to turn, fed DeLuca partial information to gain his trust, and I was close, so close, to identifying who. The explosion cut her off, not on the bridge, back at the SUV. Fire bloomed orange and black against the morning sky. The vehicle's fuel tank detonated, consuming metal and flesh and whatever was left of Nico in a fireball that sent debris raining across the valley. Marco emerged from the smoke, walking, slowly. His clothes burned, his face was black with soot. Blood ran from a dozen wounds. But he was smiling, that same insane, beautiful, broken smile. They're dead, he called across the distance. All of them, every last one. He laughed. The sound echoed off the gorge walls. I killed them all. Then his knees buckled. He collapsed. Adriana started running back toward him before thought caught up with instinct. Lucien grabbed her. Don't. He's hurt. He's dying, and we can't help him. You're just going to leave him? He'd do the same. That doesn't make it right. Lucien's eyes met hers. For the first time since the auction, she saw something human in them. Something that bled. Nothing about this is right, Miss Belmere. We're all just choosing which horrors we can survive. Behind them, Celine spoke. The traitor is Marco. Everything stopped. Lucien spun. What? Marco. It's been him the whole time, feeding information to DeLuca, setting up ambushes. He killed Victor personally. I have proof. She opened the ledger, showed pages filled with dates, communications, payments, Marco's handwriting, Marco's accounts, Marco's betrayal documented with the same care Adriana's father had used to hide evidence in paintings. Lucien stared at the pages like they were written in a language he'd forgotten how to read. No, he said. Marco's been with me for 15 years, since we were kids. He's DeLuca's nephew, Celine finished, biological son of DeLuca's dead sister, placed in your organization as a child to gain trust. Everything, every friendship, every mission, every moment of loyalty was preparation for this, for destroying you when it mattered most. Adriana looked back at Marco. He'd managed to sit up, his back against a tree, his smile still intact despite the blood. He waved. "Lucienne," he called. "Did she tell you yet? Did she explain what I am?" Lucien walked back toward the burning SUV like a man moving through water, through dream, through nightmare that had finally caught up to reality. Marco laughed. "Don't look so hurt, brother. It was never personal." 15 years. Lucien's voice cracked. "I trusted you with my life. I know. Made it easier." Marco coughed blood. "DeLuca wanted me to make you suffer before you died. Wanted me to take everything from you slowly. Your people, your organization, your hope. But honestly, I got bored. Figured I'd just kill you and get it over with." "Why? Why?" Marco's smile widened. "Because your father murdered mine. Put a bullet in my real father's head when I was 6 years old. DeLuca took me in, raised me, gave me purpose, and that purpose was watching you bleed." He pulled something from his jacket. A detonator. "The bridge," he whispered. "I wired it this morning while you were planning. DeLuca's people are on the other side. Your people are dead behind you, and in about 30 seconds, the explosives I planted are going to drop that bridge into the gorge with you on it." Adriana's legs went numb. Celine grabbed Lucien's arm. "We need to move, now." But Lucien didn't move. He stared at Marco, at the boy he'd trusted, the brother he'd chosen, the traitor who'd worn friendship like a mask for 15 years. "I loved you," Lucien said quietly. Marco's smile finally cracked. "I know, that's what made it hurt." He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Marco frowned. Pressed again, still nothing. Selena's expression didn't change. "I disarmed them 4 hours ago, when I found your plans, when I realized what you were." Marco's face went through emotions too fast to track. Confusion, rage, despair, then, finally, acceptance. He dropped the detonator. "Well," he said. "Fuck." Lucien raised his weapon. "Wait." Adriana didn't know why she spoke, didn't know what mercy looked like in a world built on betrayal, but the word came out anyway. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because killing him doesn't change what he did, doesn't undo the lies, doesn't bring back the people he destroyed. It just makes you the same as your father." Lucien's hand trembled. The weapon stayed raised. Marco watched him. "She's right, you know. You kill me, you prove DeLuca right. That Morettis are all the same, violent, vengeful, built from blood that only knows how to spill more blood. And if I let you live, I'll die anyway, in about 5 minutes. Internal bleeding, shrapnel, take your pick." Marco coughed again. More blood. "But at least you'll know you chose differently, that you broke the pattern, that mercy actually means something to you." Celine moved closer to Lucien. "He's manipulating you. It's what he does." "I know." "Then shoot him." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because she's right." Lucien lowered the weapon. "Because if I execute him, I become exactly what he spent 15 years pretending I was, and I won't give him that satisfaction." Marco laughed. It turned into choking. "You always were too soft. Your father knew it. That's why he was preparing to replace you before he died. Did you know that? He had another son, legitimate heir, hidden away, being groomed to take over when you inevitably failed." The words landed like bullets. Lucien went absolutely still. "That's a lie." "Is it? Ask Celine. She knows. She's known for years." Everyone looked at Celine. She closed her eyes. "It's true." The world tilted. "His name is Dante," Celine continued. "He's 22. Lives in Rome under a false identity. Your father kept him secret, trained him separately, was planning to announce him as heir apparent before the cancer killed him. I found out 6 months after you took over. I didn't tell you because it didn't matter. Dante had no interest in the organization. He wanted nothing to do with this life." "Where is he now?" Celine's silence was answer enough. "Where is he?" "DeLuca has him." Adriana watched Lucien's face, watched every carefully constructed wall crumble, watched 15 years of belief in Marco, in Celine, in the organization he'd tried to rebuild, collapse into ash. "How long?" His voice was barely human. 3 months. DeLuca kidnapped him after Marco provided his location. They've been using him as leverage, threatening to kill him if I didn't feed them information. I tried to negotiate, tried to mount a rescue, but every attempt failed because Marco sabotaged them from inside. You should have told me. I was trying to protect you. From what? From making the same mistakes your father did, from choosing revenge over strategy, from becoming the monster everyone expects you to be. Lucien's laugh was broken glass. Too late. He turned and started walking. Not toward Marco, not toward the bridge, toward the edge of the gorge. Adriana's heart stopped. What are you doing? He didn't answer, just kept walking until his boots scraped the edge, until loose gravel tumbled into 300 feet of empty air. Lucien, Celine said, step back. Why? What's left to fight for? Marco's a traitor. Victor's dead. Nico's dead. DeLuca has my brother. My organization is infiltrated. Everyone I trusted has been lying to me. Tell me, Celine, what exactly am I supposed to step back for? For finishing this, for making them pay. With what? I have nothing. You have me. Celine moved closer. I lied to protect you. I kept secrets to keep you alive, but I never betrayed you. Not once. Not ever. How do I know that? Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. I've had 1,000 opportunities. Instead, I've spent 6 months trying to save both you and your brother while keeping DeLuca convinced I was working for him. Instead, I disarmed Marco's explosives. Instead, I'm standing here begging you not to jump. Lucien looked at her, at Adriana, at Marco dying against the tree. Your father made monsters, Celine said quietly. But you don't have to be one. You can choose differently. You can finish what I started, save Dante, destroy DeLuca, build something better from the ashes, or you can step off that edge and prove Marco right, that Moretti's always choose death over redemption. Silence stretched. Then Lucien stepped back. He turned to Adriana. You should have run when you had the chance. Probably. Why didn't you? She thought about her father, about coded fragments and hidden compartments, about choosing mercy in a ballroom full of predators, about all the small decisions that led to standing on a bridge while the world burned. Because running doesn't finish things, she said. It just postpones them. Something that might have been respect flickered across Lucien's face. Behind them, Marco's breathing turned wet, labored, failing. Lucien, he whispered, one last thing. What? The ledger, the one the girl's carrying. It's incomplete. Your father hid additional evidence, not in paintings, in a building. The old Viscari chapel, where your sister died. DeLuca knows. He's going there tonight. If you want the full truth about what happened, about who really ordered her death, that's where you'll find it. His eyes closed. Didn't open again. Marco Bellis, brother, traitor, casualty of inherited war, stopped breathing as smoke from the burning SUV turned the morning sky black. Adriana felt nothing. No grief, no relief, just numbness spreading through her chest like frost. Celine checked her phone. DeLuca's people are regrouping. We have maybe 30 minutes before reinforcements arrive. Can we reach the chapel before them? Barely, but it's a trap, obviously. I don't care. You should. Lucien looked at the ledger Adriana still clutched, at the proof her father died trying to expose, at the evidence that had cost Victor, Nico, and Marco their lives, one way or another. If DeLuca wants to end this at the chapel where my sister died, Lucien said, then that's where it ends. One way or the other. No more running, no more secrets, just truth and consequences. He started walking back across the bridge. Celine followed. Adriana stood at the edge looking down at Marco's body, at the smile frozen on his face, at the blood and betrayal and wasted years. Are you coming? Lucien called back. She thought about saying no, about demanding they let her leave, about trying to reclaim whatever life might exist beyond this nightmare. But she decoded her father's secrets, opened his hidden compartments, followed his bloody trail straight into the heart of corruption he died trying to expose. Finishing it felt like the only choice that mattered. Yes, she said. I'm coming. They found a vehicle abandoned by DeLuca's people, keys still in the ignition, windows shot out, but engine intact. Celine drove. Lucien sat in front, weapon across his lap, eyes fixed on the horizon like he could see through distance and time to where this ended. Adriana sat in back, the ledger pressed against her ribs. Outside, Tuscany passed in blurs of green and gold. Beautiful, indifferent. The same landscape that had witnessed centuries of violence disguised as civilization. "The chapel," Adriana said quietly. "Tell me what happened there." Lucien didn't turn. "My sister was 9 years old. Her name was Isabella. She loved horses and painting and terrible jokes that made my father grimace. One afternoon, she was supposed to be at school. Instead, she went to the old Viscari chapel, the one my family owned but never used. She wanted to see the frescoes." His voice stayed flat, controlled, but Adriana heard the fracture underneath. Someone was waiting. Someone who knew she'd be there, knew she'd be alone. They beat her, questioned her, tried to make her reveal where my father kept certain documents. She was 9. She didn't know anything, so they killed her anyway. Made it look like she'd fallen from the bell tower. Adriana's throat closed. "My father found her 3 hours later," Lucien continued. "He blamed De Luca. Started a war that killed dozens, destroyed alliances. But he never had proof. Never knew for certain who gave the order, so the question haunted him until cancer did what his enemies couldn't. And now Marco says the answer is in that chapel." "Yes. It's a trap. I know. De Luca will kill you. He'll try." Celine glanced at him. "We need a plan beyond suicide. I'm open to suggestions. How many people can you call? Loyalists we can actually trust." Lucien pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. His expression darkened. "After Marco? After 6 months of leaks? Maybe 4. Maybe none. Then we go alone. 3 people against De Luca's entire operation. Excellent odds. Better than standing still while he consolidates power." They drove in silence. An hour later, the chapel appeared on the horizon. It stood alone on a hillside, ancient stone walls wrapped in ivy, the bell tower rising against the sky like an accusation. No other buildings nearby, no cover, just open ground and centuries-old stone. Celine stopped the vehicle half a mile away. "He's already here," she said, pointing. 5 black SUVs surrounded the chapel, men in tactical gear positioned at every entrance, snipers on the roof, professional, prepared, waiting. 50 people minimum, Celine estimated, maybe more inside. "Can we get a message to the police?" Adriana asked. "Frame this as, De Luca owns half the police in this region," Lucien said. "They'll arrive after he leaves, find only bodies, conclude it was gang violence, and close the investigation within a week." "Then what do we do?" Lucien looked at her. Really looked at her. "You don't do anything. You stay here. Celine and I will handle this." "That's insane. That's realistic. You're a civilian. You have no training, no weapons, no reason to die for a war you didn't start." "My father started it." "Your father's dead. You don't owe his memory a suicide mission?" Adriana met his eyes. "Maybe not. But I owe myself the truth. About why he did what he did. About whether he died trying to be brave or just trying to escape consequences. And that answer is in there." She pointed at the chapel. Lucien studied her face, looking for fear, for doubt, for any excuse to leave her behind. He found none. "You stay behind me," he said finally. "You follow orders. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." Celine handed Adriana a small pistol. "Safety here. Point at what you want dead. Pull the trigger. Don't aim for the head, you'll miss. Center mass. Keep pulling until they stop moving." Adriana took the weapon. It felt impossibly heavy, like holding someone's death in her hand. They approached the chapel on foot. No attempt at stealth. No pretending this was anything but what it was. 3 people walking into hell with eyes open and no way out but through. De Luca's men watched them come. No one fired. They wanted this meeting. The chapel's main entrance stood open. Candlelight flickered inside. Someone had cleaned the space, swept the floors, removed the debris of abandonment, arranged everything like preparation for ceremony or execution. They stepped inside. The interior was smaller than Adriana expected. Frescoed walls showed scenes of martyrdom and redemption. The altar stood draped in white cloth, and in the center of the nave, surrounded by armed men, stood Vittorio De Luca. He looked nothing like a crime lord, He looked like someone's grandfather. Slight build, gray hair, glasses perched on a patrician nose, expensive suit that whispered instead of shouted, but his eyes were winter dead, empty of everything but calculation. Beside him, on his knees with hands bound, was a young man Adriana had never seen. Dark hair, pale eyes that matched Lucien. Men's face that carried the same sharp architecture. Dante, Lucien's brother, the legitimate heir, the ghost their father kept hidden. "Lucien," DeLuca said pleasantly, "so good of you to come. I was worried you'd be too intelligent to accept such an obvious trap." Lucien's weapon stayed down. "Let him go." "Eventually, after we conclude our business." "What business?" "You've already taken everything, my people, my organization, my hope. What more do you want?" DeLuca smiled. It was warm, grandfatherly, absolutely terrifying. "The truth. I want you to know the truth before you die. About your sister, about your father, about the empire you thought you inherited." He pulled a folder from his jacket. Inside were photographs, old ones, black and white, showing a young man who looked eerily like Lucien standing beside DeLuca, both smiling, both holding drinks, both completely at ease. "Your father," DeLuca said, "was my best friend for 30 years. We built our organizations together, shared territory, divided profits. He was the brother I never had, until he decided he wanted everything for himself." He showed another photograph. This one showed the same two men, older now, faces harder, on opposite sides of a table. The body language had changed. Adversarial, hostile. "Your father orchestrated the massacre that killed my family. Not me. Him. He murdered 17 people, including my wife, to seize control of southern routes. Then he blamed me, started a war to cover his own crime, and I spent 20 years trying to prove it." Lucien's face went absolutely still. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask your brother. Ask Dante. Your father told him everything before he died, made him promise to finish the organization properly, to repair the damage done. That's why he kept Dante hidden. He wanted an heir who understood the truth, who could rebuild without the weight of your father's lies." Dante spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, broken. "It's true. He told me, on his deathbed, about Isabella, about the massacre, about everything." The world tilted. Lucien looked at his brother, at Celine, at Adriana, looking for anything that made sense, finding nothing. "Isabella," DeLuca continued gently, "discovered her father's plan accidentally, overheard a phone call about the massacre while it was being arranged. She was 9, innocent, terrified, and your father knew she'd eventually tell someone, so he brought her to this chapel, made it look like I'd ordered her death, used her murder to justify the war he'd already planned." "No," Lucien whispered. "Yes, and the proof is right there." DeLuca pointed toward the altar. "Hidden exactly where your father left it. Documentation of every order, every plan, every child he murdered, building an empire you thought was righteous." Adriana moved before thought caught up with motion. She walked to the altar on legs that barely held her. Behind the white cloth built into the stone, she found a hidden compartment identical to the ones her father created in paintings. Inside was another ledger. She pulled it out, opened it, and read her father's handwriting, documenting orders that turned her stomach. Names, dates, payments, all commissioned by Lucien's father, all targeting innocents, all hidden inside the same artwork she'd spent her life learning to restore, including Isabella Moretti. Age 9. Cause of death: traumatic injury consistent with fall from height. Actual cause: manual strangulation. Staged to appear accidental. Ordered by Antonio Moretti. Reason: security liability. Witness to planned massacre. The ledger fell from Adriana's hands. She looked at Lucien. His face had gone beyond pale, beyond shock, into something that didn't have words. "Your father," DeLuca said softly, "killed his own daughter to protect his ambition, and he let you believe I was responsible, let you inherit a war built on fratricide and lies. I tried to expose it, tried to stop him, and when he died, I tried to make peace with you. But you were too busy playing hero, too convinced of your own righteousness to see the monster you served." He nodded to his men. They raised their weapons. "I'm sorry, Lucien. Truly, you deserve better than the legacy you were given. But you chose to defend it anyway, and that choice ends here. Celine moved first. Her weapon came up faster than physics should allow. She fired twice. Two of DeLuca's men dropped. Then everyone started shooting. The chapel exploded into violence. Muzzle flashes strobed across frescoed saints. Bullets chewed through ancient stone. Adriana hit the floor as the world became noise and death and the smell of cordite. Lucien grabbed Dante, cutting his bonds with a knife that appeared from nowhere. Celine provided cover, her movements clinical, professional, each shot finding flesh. But there were too many. DeLuca's men surrounded them, closed in. Adriana fired her pistol blindly, terrified, useless. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. She had no idea if she hit anything. Celine went down. Not dead, but wounded. Blood spread across her shoulder. Her weapon skittered away. Lucien stood over her, over Dante, over Adriana. Gun empty. Options gone. Waiting for the end he'd been running from his entire life. DeLuca walked through the gunfire like it didn't exist, stood in front of Lucien, raised his weapon. "Your father made monsters," he said quietly, "and monsters devour each other. It's just the way things work." He pulled the trigger. The shot never came. Instead, Dante surged forward, threw himself between the weapon and his brother. The bullet meant for Lucien's head caught Dante in the chest. He collapsed into Lucien's arms, blood spreading across white shirt, eyes already fading. "I'm sorry," Dante whispered, "for everything, for not being there, for not helping you, for believing father's lies for so long. I'm sorry." His eyes closed. Lucien made a sound no human should make. It came from somewhere deeper than throat or chest, somewhere beyond language, beyond sanity. He laid Dante down gently, stood, picked up Celine's fallen weapon, and when he looked at DeLuca, Adriana saw something in his face that made her forget how to breathe. Not rage, not grief, something colder. Lucien Moretti, the man who'd tried so hard not to become his father, finally let the monster free. The first bullet caught DeLuca in the shoulder before anyone could breathe. Lucien didn't aim, didn't calculate. His body moved with the mechanical precision of something that had stopped being human and become pure function. The weapon bucked in his hand. Once, twice, 3 times. Each shot placed with the expertise of a man who'd learned violence before he learned mercy. DeLuca spun backward, his glasses shattering, his expensive suit blooming red. He hit the altar hard enough to crack stone. Blood spread across white cloth like sacrament. His men opened fire. The chapel became hell. Adriana pressed herself against the floor as bullets chewed through frescoed saints overhead. Chunks of plaster rained down. A ricochet sparked off the stone beside her head, close enough that she felt the heat. Her ears rang with noise that obliterated thought. Lucien moved through the chaos like something choreographed by violence itself. He fired, rolled, came up behind a column as return fire punched holes through ancient stone, reloaded without looking. His face was empty of everything except purpose. Celine dragged herself upright despite the blood streaming from her shoulder. She retrieved a weapon from a fallen guard with her good hand. Started firing. Her shots were clinical, efficient. Each one found flesh. "Adriana!" she screamed over the gunfire. "The bell tower! Go!" Adriana didn't move. Couldn't move. Terror had welded her spine to stone. A hand grabbed her arm. "Lucien!" His pale eyes locked on hers for one impossible second. "Run! Now!" "I can't!" "Yes, you can!" He shoved something into her hands. The ledger, her father's ledger, the one documenting Antonio Moretti's sins. "Get this out. Whatever happens here, that evidence survives. What about you?" "I'm finishing this. That's suicide." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Probably." Then he was gone. Moving, firing, drawing DeLuca's men away from where Adriana crouched like prey trying to become invisible. Celine appeared beside her, bleeding and furious. "Tower! Now! I'll cover you!" This time, Adriana ran. She sprinted toward the narrow door leading to the bell tower staircase. Behind her, gunfire intensified. She heard Celine's voice screaming orders in Italian, heard men dying, heard the wet sounds bodies made when bullets found them. The staircase spiraled upward into darkness, stone steps worn smooth by centuries of feet climbing toward heaven or hiding from hell. Adriana took them two at a time, her boots slipping on ancient stone, the ledger clutched against her ribs like a child. Behind her, something exploded. The concussion slammed through the tower hard enough to crack her teeth together. She fell forward, catching herself on the stairs with hands that immediately started bleeding. Smoke billowed up from below, acrid and chemical. Grenade, her brain supplied uselessly. She kept climbing. The bell chamber appeared after what felt like hours, but was probably 90 seconds. Open archways on all sides overlooking the valley. The massive bronze bell hung silent overhead, its surface green with age. Wind cut through the space, carrying the smell of smoke and spring flowers. Adriana ran to the eastern archway and looked down. The chapel grounds had transformed into a battlefield. Bodies littered the grass. Some wore DeLuca's colors, some wore Lucien's. She couldn't tell anymore which side anyone had started on because blood didn't discriminate. The surviving gunmen had taken cover behind vehicles, behind gravestones, behind anything solid enough to stop bullets. In the center of it all, Lucien and DeLuca faced each other, both wounded, both bleeding, both still standing through will that transcended flesh. DeLuca's shoulder was destroyed. His arm hung useless, but his left hand held a weapon steady. "You should have stayed ignorant," he called across the distance. "Should have kept believing your father's lies. At least you could have died righteous." Lucien's response was lost in the wind, but Adriana saw his body language, saw the way he moved despite what had to be broken ribs and bullet wounds, saw the monster his father created finally wearing its true face. "Your sister screamed," DeLuca continued, "when your father's hands closed around her throat. She called for you. Called your name over and over, but you weren't there to save her." Lucien fired. The bullet went wide. Or maybe DeLuca moved. Either way, the shot sparked off stone instead of flesh. DeLuca smiled. Out of practice? Or out of heart? He raised his weapon. Adriana screamed a warning that the wind stole before it reached the ground. The shot came from neither of them. It came from the tree line. A sniper DeLuca had positioned hours earlier finally had his angle. The bullet caught Lucien in the side, spinning him around, dropping him to one knee. Adriana watched him fall, watched him try to rise, watched him fail. DeLuca walked forward slowly, savoring. "Your father built an empire on the corpses of children. You tried to rebuild it on lies about redemption. But empires don't change, Lucien. They just find new ways to justify the same old violence." He leveled his weapon at Lucien's head. "This is mercy, compared to what you deserve." Adriana moved without thought. She grabbed the bell rope with both hands and pulled. The bronze bell swung. Its voice exploded across the valley, deep, resonant, loud enough to split the world. The sound wave hit like physical force. Birds scattered from trees. The remaining combatants below covered their ears. Even DeLuca flinched. And in that half-second of distraction, Celine appeared. She materialized from the chapel doorway with a rifle Adriana hadn't seen her carrying. Her shoulder was a ruin of blood and torn fabric. Her face was gray with blood loss. But her hand stayed steady. She fired once. The bullet caught DeLuca in the spine. He dropped like someone had cut his strings, fell forward onto ancient grass. His weapon skittered away. His legs didn't move. Paralyzed from the waist down, his body finally betraying him the way he'd betrayed others for decades. Celine collapsed. The rifle fell from her hands. Adriana ran down the stairs so fast she almost broke her neck 3 times. She burst from the tower into carnage. The gunfire had stopped. DeLuca's remaining men were fleeing or dying or already dead. The grass was slick with blood. She found Lucien first. He'd managed to crawl to where Dante lay, had pulled his brother into his arms. Dante's eyes were half open, seeing nothing, already cooling in the spring air. Lucien rocked him gently, pressing his forehead against Dante's, whispering something in Italian that sounded like prayers or apologies or both. "Lucien." Adriana dropped beside him. He didn't look at her, didn't seem to see anything except his brother's face. "He saved me," Lucien whispered. "He didn't have to. He barely knew me. Our father kept us apart our entire lives. And still, His voice broke. Adriana pressed her hand against his side. Blood soaked through immediately. "You're hit. You need medical—" "I need nothing." That's the blood loss talking. That's the truth talking. He finally looked at her. His pale eyes were empty, hollowed out. Everyone I've ever trusted is dead or dying. My sister, my brother, Nico, Marco, even Marco, who I loved despite what he was. All gone. And for what? For an empire built on lies? For a war my father started by murdering his own child? For the truth, Adriana said. For finally knowing what your father really was. The truth doesn't resurrect the dead. No, but it prevents more dying. She showed him the ledger. This? Everything my father documented, everything your father tried to hide. It's enough to destroy the network, to expose everyone, politicians, bankers, crime families, all of it. My father died trying to make sure this survived. Your brother died making sure you survived. Don't waste that by giving up now. Lucien stared at the ledger like it was written in a language he'd forgotten. Then Celine's voice cut through the moment. Lucienne, get up. She'd dragged herself upright against a gravestone. Her face was the color of old paper. Blood had soaked through her entire left side, but her eyes were alert, sharp. DeLuca's still breathing, she said, and breathing men talk. They found him where he'd fallen, still alive, still conscious. His legs useless, his spine shattered, but his mind perfectly intact behind eyes that had watched too much and regretted nothing. Lucien stood over him. Why, Isabella? Why kill a child? DeLuca coughed blood. I didn't kill her. Your father did. I told you. You orchestrated everything else. The massacre. The war. 20 years of violence. You could have exposed him, could have proven what he'd done. Instead, you used it, built your own empire on his sins, so tell me why. Because that's what we are. DeLuca's smile was terrible. Men who inherit violence and call it legacy. Your father understood that. He knew the only difference between us and the people we destroyed was luck and willingness. He accepted it, embraced it, while you tried to pretend you were better, tried to build something righteous from rotten foundations. And look where it got you, surrounded by corpses, holding your dead brother, bleeding out in a chapel that's seen more murder than prayer. Call Baishi Ba. Is that supposed to be wisdom? It's supposed to be warning. You kill me, someone else rises. You destroy this network, another builds in its place. You spend your whole life fighting monsters. You just create space for worse ones. Lucien's hand tightened on his weapon. Then what's the point? There isn't one. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We're all just killing time until time kills us. Your sister knew it, felt it that last moment when your father's hands closed around her throat. She understood exactly what you're understanding now, that the people we love destroy us, that family is just another word for inescapable. You're wrong. Am I? DeLuca's eyes found Adriana. Ask her. Ask the conservator's daughter. Her father tried to be brave, tried to expose corruption, and he died slowly, painfully, destroyed by the same people he'd helped for years. That's the reward for choosing right. Suffering. Adriana knelt beside DeLuca, close enough to see the broken blood vessels in his eyes, close enough to smell the cologne and gunpowder and fear he wouldn't admit. My father, she said quietly, spent 7 years helping monsters hide evidence. Then he spent 2 years trying to fix it. That's not a perfect redemption arc. That's just being human, making mistakes, trying to correct them, failing, trying again. And maybe dying before he could finish. But at least he tried. At least he chose differently in the end. What did you choose? Survival. At what cost? Every cost. That's the price of living. No. Adriana stood. That's the price of dying slowly. My father died slowly, in pain, full of regret, but he died trying to be better than what he'd been. You're dying exactly the same as you lived, empty. She looked at Lucien. He's not worth the bullet. DeLuca laughed. The sound turned liquid, drowning. The police are coming. I can hear the sirens. They'll find you here. Find the bodies. Find the evidence. And they'll arrest you for mass murder because that's what this looks like. My people will testify I was the victim, that you attacked me, that you slaughtered innocent men, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison wondering if anything you did mattered. Will they? Celine's voice was getting weaker. Because I've been recording this entire conversation, your confession, Your admissions, every word, and it's already uploading to servers in 3 countries. Even if you survive, even if we all die, the truth survives. That was always the plan. She showed her phone, the recording app running, the upload progress bar at 97%. DeLuca's face went slack. No. Yes. And by tomorrow, every journalist, every prosecutor, every person you've paid to look the other way will have copies. You're finished. Your network is finished. And history will remember you exactly as you deserve, as a man who murdered children and called it business. The upload hit 100%. DeLuca closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were empty of everything except acceptance. Do it then. Finish me. Be the monster your father trained you to be. Lucien looked at his weapon, at DeLuca, at Dante's body still cradled in the grass. No, he said quietly. He lowered the gun. I'm not my father, and I'm not you. I'm the thing you both created, someone who knows exactly what monsters look like because I've been surrounded by them my entire life. Someone who understands violence intimately enough to choose differently. You don't get a bullet. You get to live. Paralyzed. Imprisoned. Watching your empire collapse. Watching everyone you corrupted turn on you. That's a better punishment than death. He turned away. DeLuca screamed something in Italian that sounded like curses or pleas or both. But Lucien kept walking. Toward Celine, toward Adriana, toward whatever survived beyond this moment. Sirens grew louder. Celine grabbed Lucien's arm with her good hand. We need to move. Now. I've arranged extraction, but we have maybe 5 minutes before... A vehicle exploded. Not near them. Further out. One of DeLuca's SUVs erupted into a fireball that sent debris arcing through the sky. Then another. Then another. Systematic. Planned. What the hell? Adriana breathed. Insurance, Celine said. Contingency protocols I activated when DeLuca started shooting. If things went bad, destroy the evidence. Make it look like gang warfare. Give us clean escape. You planned for this? I planned for everything. More explosions. The chapel's roof caught fire. Flames spread through ancient timber. Smoke billowed black and thick. A helicopter appeared over the tree line. Black. Unmarked. It landed 50 meters away, rotor wash flattening grass and scattering ash. That's ours, Celine said. Go. Now. They ran. Lucien supporting Celine, Adriana clutching the ledger. Behind them, the chapel burned. DeLuca's voice rose in screams that the fire would eventually silence. They reached the helicopter as police vehicles appeared on the access road. Adriana looked back once, saw the chaos, the fire, the bodies, the end of something that had started decades before she was born. Then Lucien pulled her inside. The helicopter lifted. Below, the chapel collapsed inward, centuries of stone surrendering to flame, beautiful and terrible. A pyre for all the people who died trying to build empires on suffering. Adriana pressed her forehead against the window and cried, not for DeLuca, not even for Dante, though his death ached somewhere deep. She cried for her father, for the impossible choices he'd faced, for the 7 years he spent helping monsters, and the 2 years he spent trying to fix it, and the painful death he endured as punishment. Lucien sat across from her, Celine's head resting against his shoulder as medics from the helicopter worked to stabilize her injuries. His face was gray. His side was soaked with blood. But his eyes stayed open, alert, watching the chapel burn. Where are we going? Adriana asked. Safe house, Switzerland. I have resources there. Accounts DeLuca didn't know about. We'll recover, regroup, figure out what comes next. What does come next? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. The helicopter carried them across the Italian border as dawn broke over the Alps. Gold light touched snow-covered peaks. The world below looked clean, untouched, as if violence was something that only existed in shadows and ancient chapels. They landed on a private airfield outside Zurich. More vehicles waited. More people Lucien trusted or paid, or both. They transferred Celine to a medical facility that asked no questions, cleaned Lucien's wounds, gave Adriana clothes that didn't smell like smoke. For 12 hours, they existed in suspension, waiting, recovering, letting adrenaline drain. Then the news broke. Every major outlet across Europe led with the same story. Massive corruption network exposed. Financial records detailing decades of criminal activity. Politicians implicated. Bankers arrested. Crime families torn apart by internal investigations. And at the center, two names repeated over and over: Antonio Moretti and Vittorio De Luca. The ledgers had gone public exactly as Selene promised. Adriana watched the coverage from a hotel room overlooking Lake Zurich. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, thinner, harder, marked by things that wouldn't wash away. A knock at the door. Lucian entered without waiting for permission. He moved carefully, his ribs taped, his side bandaged, but his eyes clearer than they'd been in the chapel. "Selene's stable," he said. "She'll need surgery. Months of recovery. But she'll survive." "Good." The authorities have issued warrants for De Luca, for his lieutenants, for everyone the ledgers named. It'll take years to prosecute, but the network is broken. Finished. Also good. Lucian sat in the chair by the window. For a while, neither spoke. "Your father," he said finally, "everything he documented, everything he risked, it worked. You should know that. What he did, what you helped finish, it mattered." Adriana's throat tightened. "Doesn't bring him back." "No. But it means he didn't die for nothing. He died because your father poisoned him." "I know, and I'm sorry for that. For everything my family did to yours. For dragging you into this. For—" "Stop!" Adriana looked at him. "You didn't drag me. I chose. Every step, every decision. I could have run after the auction. Could have refused to help. Could have jumped from that helicopter. But I didn't, because finishing what my father started mattered more than safety. So don't apologize for choices I made." "What will you do now?" The question hung in the air. Adriana thought about Chicago, about the studio apartment she'd never see again, about the restoration work that felt like a previous life, about the girl who'd knelt in broken glass to help a stranger and accidentally triggered a war. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything I was, conservator, daughter, person trying to pay off debt, all of that is gone. I can't go back to Chicago, can't return to my old life. De Luca's people might be broken, but someone will want revenge eventually. So I'm just here, existing. No plans, no purpose." "Purpose is overrated," says the man who inherited a criminal empire. "Inherited, past tense, I'm done with it, all of it. Selene can handle the dissolution, transfer the legitimate businesses to proper ownership, burn the rest. I want nothing to do with what my father built." "Then what will you do?" Lucien's smile was small and painful. "I don't know either. Guess we're both lost." They sat in silence as the sun set over the lake. Gold turned to orange, turned to purple, turned to dark. Lights appeared across the water. The world continued exactly as it always had, indifferent to their survival. Adriana's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "The fragment you decoded led to the destruction of one of Europe's most powerful criminal networks. Your father would be proud. If you ever want to talk about his work, the real work, not the crimes, call me. Richard Castellano." She stared at the screen. "Richard," she said. "My old employer. The one who sent me to the auction." Lucian tensed. "He's De Luca's. No. He was my father's friend, really his friend. He set me up, yes, put me in your path, but not to help De Luca, to help you. He knew I'd wear the coat, knew you'd notice, knew I was the only person who could decode the fragments because my father taught me. He orchestrated everything to make sure the truth came out." She showed Lucien the message. "Your father had allies," Lucien said quietly. "People who believed in what he was trying to do at the end. People who kept trying after he died." Apparently, another message arrived. "Selene Vale says you saved her life in the chapel, that you rang the bell. I owe you a debt. If you need anything, sanctuary, resources, protection, it's yours. SV." Then another. "The recording is everywhere. De Luca's allies are turning on each other. The empire is eating itself. You did that. You and the conservator. Tell her thank you." Anonymous. More messages. More people. More pieces of a network she hadn't known existed. People her father had helped. People who'd waited years for someone to finish what he started. People who'd been fighting the same war from different positions. "My father wasn't alone," Adriana whispered. "He had help. People protecting the evidence. people waiting for the right moment. I thought he died isolated, abandoned, but he didn't. He died surrounded by a network trying to do the same thing he was. Doing the right thing is rarely solitary, Lucian said, even when it feels that way. Adriana looked at him, at the man who'd kidnapped her from a Venetian bridge, who'd forced her to decode secrets, who'd dragged her through war, who'd lost everything trying to escape his father's shadow. What happens to us now? She asked. We heal, we hide, we figure out how to exist as something other than weapons. That simple? Nothing's ever simple, but it's a start. He stood slowly, crossed to the door, paused. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad you helped that girl in the ballroom. Glad you chose mercy when everyone else chose distance. It saved my life, in more ways than the obvious. He left before she could respond. Adriana turned back to the window. Her reflection stared back, scarred, exhausted, fundamentally changed, but alive, still breathing, still capable of choosing what came next. Her phone buzzed again. This time a news alert. Vittorio De Luca found dead in chapel ruins. Authorities rule accidental death by fire. Investigation ongoing. Adriana felt nothing, not relief, not grief, just numbness where emotion should have lived. De Luca had died exactly as he predicted, destroyed by the same violence he'd spent decades cultivating. His empire collapsed, his allies scattered, his legacy reduced to corruption exposed and criminals arrested. The chapel fire had consumed him the way his ambitions had consumed everyone else. Poetic, maybe, or just inevitable. She looked at the ledger sitting on the hotel room desk. Her father's handwriting, his careful documentation, his final attempt at redemption. It had worked, but the cost. Dante, Nico, Marco, Victor, all the bodies left behind, felt impossibly high. Was it worth it? She asked the empty room, asked her father's ghost, asked the universe that never answered. No response came, just silence and the sound of her own breathing and the knowledge that she'd survived this exactly like she'd survived everything else, by choosing to keep existing even when existing hurt. Dawn came eventually. Adriana watched the sun rise over the Alps, painting snow gold and pink and beautiful. The world insisted on beauty despite everything, insisted on mornings and new light, and the possibility that healing was something other than fantasy. She thought about calling Richard, about learning who her father really was beneath the crimes and mistakes, about understanding the man instead of the legend. She thought about Lucien, about whether two people broken by the same war could build something from the shattered pieces. She thought about Celine, about women who survived by being harder than the men who underestimated them. She thought about mercy, about the moment in the ballroom when she'd chosen to help instead of walk away, about how that single decision had cascaded into war and death and the destruction of empires, about whether she'd do it again, knowing the cost. The answer came without hesitation. Yes. Because choosing mercy, choosing to see suffering and respond instead of ignore, was the only thing separating humans from the monsters they created, was the only defense against becoming what they fought. Her father understood that at the end. Lucien was learning it now. And Adriana, marked by violence, shaped by impossible choices, forever changed, refused to forget it. She picked up her phone, dialed Richard's number. He answered on the second ring. Adriana, tell me about my father, she said. Tell me everything, the real story, who he was, who he wanted to be, all of it. It'll take a while. I have time. Then let's start at the beginning. Your father, Giovanni Belmire, was one of the bravest men I ever knew, not because he never made mistakes, but because when he finally understood what he'd helped create, he spent everything he had left trying to burn it down. Adriana settled into the chair. Outside, the sun climbed higher. Inside, her father's friend began the story she'd been searching for her entire life. And for the first time since the auction, since the kidnapping, since the war that had stolen everything familiar, Adriana felt something like hope. Not healing, not peace, just the possibility that understanding the past might help her survive the future. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Richard Castellano's voice carried the weight of decades when he finally spoke the truth. Your father, he said through the phone, walked into my studio in Milan in 1993, carrying a portfolio of restoration work so flawless I thought he was lying about doing it himself. He was 32, brilliant, desperate. He'd just lost his wife, your mother, to complications from your birth, had a 6-month-old daughter he was raising alone. He needed work, any work. I hired him on the spot. Adriana pressed the phone against her ear, watching dawn light spread across Lake Zurich. Her hotel room felt impossibly still, like the world had paused to let her father's ghost finally speak. For 3 years, Giovanni was the best conservator I'd ever seen. Meticulous, passionate. He treated damaged paintings like wounded children, careful, reverent, determined to heal what others had given up on. Then Antonio Moretti walked into our studio. Richard's voice darkened. Moretti didn't ask. He didn't negotiate. He explained what he needed. Paintings altered to hide compartments, work done with such precision that even experts would miss it. And he explained what would happen if Giovanni refused. Your father looked at you, barely 4 years old, playing with paintbrushes in the corner, and he chose survival over principle. He said yes. Adriana's eyes burned. She didn't wipe the tears, just let them fall. For 7 years, he did exactly what Moretti demanded. Hid ledgers and masterpieces, created false provenance, made corruption invisible inside beauty. And every night, he came home to you and pretended everything was normal, that his hands hadn't spent the day enabling murder. I watched him die slowly inside, watched the light drain from his eyes, watched him become a ghost operating a body. Why didn't he stop? Adriana whispered. Because Moretti threatened you, specifically. Said if Giovanni ever refused, ever tried to expose the operation, you'd disappear. They'd make it look like a custody dispute, like your father was unfit. You'd vanish into foster care or worse, and he'd spend the rest of his life knowing he'd failed to protect the only person he had left. The words landed like bullets. So he kept working, kept hiding evidence, kept hating himself, until 1999. Until he witnessed something that broke whatever was left of his moral compromise. Moretti ordered the execution of a federal prosecutor who was getting too close. Giovanni watched it happen, watched an innocent man beg for his life, watched Moretti put a bullet in his head without hesitation, and something inside your father snapped. Richard paused. Adriana heard him breathing, gathering strength for what came next. He started documenting everything. Photographing ledgers before hiding them, recording conversations, building evidence with the same meticulous care he used for restoration. He contacted De Luca, yes, De Luca the enemy, because he believed exposing both families was the only way to destroy the network entirely. But Moretti's people intercepted the communication. They couldn't kill Giovanni outright without raising questions, so they did something crueler. They poisoned him. Slow-acting carcinogens designed to mimic natural cancer gave him maybe 2 years of suffering before death. Adriana made a sound that wasn't quite human. Your father knew what they'd done. The doctors couldn't prove it, but he knew. And instead of giving up, he spent those final 2 years hiding the most damning evidence where even Moretti couldn't find it. Inside paintings scattered across Europe. Inside that fragment he sewed into his coat, the one you wore to the auction. He was preparing, planning, hoping someone would eventually finish what he started. Why didn't he tell me? The question tore from Adriana's throat. Why let me believe he was just a conservator? Why die without explaining? Because telling you made you a target. Moretti's people watched you even after Giovanni died. Waited to see if you knew anything, if you tried to continue his work. But you didn't. You just restored paintings and paid his medical debt and lived quietly. So they left you alone. Giovanni died knowing you were safe because you were ignorant. That was his final gift. Letting you live. Adriana pressed her hand against her mouth, tried to breathe through grief that felt like drowning, until Richard Castellano sent you to that auction wearing your father's coat, until you knelt in broken glass and showed mercy, until Lucien Moretti noticed you. Then everything your father built, all the evidence, all the planning, all the sacrifice, finally had someone capable of finishing it. You, Adriana. You were always supposed to be the one. I didn't want this. Neither did he. But we rarely get to choose our inheritance. We just decide what to do with it. They talked for another hour. Richard filled in details. Names of people who'd helped her father, locations where additional evidence remained hidden, the network of allies who'd been waiting years for someone to ignite what Giovanni Belmire had prepared. When they finally hung up, Adriana sat in silence as morning burned away the last shadows. Her father hadn't been perfect, hadn't been heroic. He'd been a man who made terrible compromises, suffered for them, then died trying to fix what he'd broken. Human, flawed, brave only at the end when bravery cost everything. She could live with that truth, had to live with it, because it was the only one she'd get. A knock at the door pulled her from grief's grip. Lucian stood in the hallway, dressed in clean clothes that made him look almost civilized, but his eyes carried shadows that no amount of rest would erase. "Celine's awake," he said, "asking for you." They took a car to the medical facility, an anonymous building in Zurich's financial district that treated people who needed discretion more than insurance forms. Celine occupied a private room with views of the river. She sat propped against pillows, her left arm immobilized, her shoulder wrapped in enough bandages to supply a small war, but her eyes were sharp, alert, absolutely alive. "You look terrible," she told Adriana. "You were shot in the spine, shoulder. The spine shot was for DeLuca. Try to keep your catastrophes organized." Celine's smile was small, but genuine. "Sit, both of you. We need to talk about what happens next." Lucien took the chair by the window. Adriana perched on the edge of the bed. "DeLuca's dead," Celine continued. "His network is collapsing. Arrests are happening across 6 countries. The ledgers you recovered are providing enough evidence to prosecute for decades. It's over. Actually, over." "Feels too easy," Lucien said. "Because you're used to nothing being easy. But sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, things actually end. Wars conclude by empires fall. People get to stop fighting and start living." She looked at him. "Your father's organization no longer exists. I've spent the last 12 hours coordinating its dissolution. Legitimate businesses are being transferred to proper ownership. Criminal assets are being seized by authorities or distributed to victim compensation funds. By next week, the Moretti name will be associated with cautionary tales and prosecution, nothing more." "And us?" Adriana asked. "You're ghosts. I've arranged new identities for both of you. Passports, financial accounts, complete backgrounds that'll hold up to everything except forensic investigation. You can go anywhere. Be anyone. Start over." Lucian's expression didn't change. "What about you?" "I'm done hiding. Done running operations from shadows. I'm testifying, publicly, against everyone the ledgers implicate. I'll spend the next 5 years in courtrooms making sure every monster your father enabled faces consequences. Then maybe I'll retire somewhere quiet and learn how to sleep without weapons." "They'll try to kill you. They'll fail. I'm very hard to kill. You should remember that." "Celine, stop." Her voice softened. "You saved my life in that chapel. When Marco's grenade went off, when I was pinned, you pulled me out instead of running. You chose me over escape. That's not nothing, so let me choose this. Let me finish what your father started and my brother died trying to stop. Let me do something that matters." Lucian's jaw tightened. "I don't want to lose you. You're not losing me. You're letting me win. There's a difference." They sat in silence. Outside, Zurich continued its efficient, beautiful existence. Banks operated. Trains ran on time. People lived lives untouched by the violence that had shaped everyone in this room. "What will you do?" Celine asked Lucien. "After everything. When you're not rebuilding or destroying or surviving. What does Lucien Moretti actually want?" The question hung in the air like something fragile. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never asked myself that question. I've always been what my father needed me to be. Then what the organization needed. Then what survival demanded. I don't know who I am without the war." "Then figure it out. You have time now. You have resources. You have freedom. Use it." She turned to Adriana. "And you? The girl who restored paintings and paid debts and thought her life was small. What do you want?" Adriana looked at her hands. They were scarred now, marked by broken glass and gun recoil and climbing bell towers while men died below. She'd never restore paintings professionally again. Too much scrutiny, too many questions she couldn't answer. "I want to understand him," she said quietly. "My father, who he really was beyond the mistakes. I want to learn about the people he helped at the end. The network Richard mentioned. I want to see if there's anything left to finish, any evidence still hidden, any good that can come from what he tried to do." "That's not a want, that's a mission." "Maybe I need a mission. Maybe that's the only way I know how to exist now. Celine's expression softened with something that looked like recognition. You're more like your father than you think. He couldn't stop either. Couldn't let go until the work was finished. It killed him. Don't let it kill you. Then what should I do? Live. Actually live. Not survive, not hide, not just exist from one crisis to the next. Find something that makes you happy. Something that has nothing to do with ledgers or empires or inherited wars. Find it and hold on to it like your life depends on it, because it does. Adriana wanted to argue, wanted to explain that happiness felt like a language she'd never learned. But looking at Celine, wounded, exhausted, still fighting, she understood that the woman spoke from experience, from years of choosing missions over life until the two became indistinguishable. I'll try, Adriana said. Good, now get out, both of you. I need to sleep, and you need to stop looking at me like I'm dying. I survived worse than a shoulder wound. I'll survive this. They left her there, surrounded by monitors and medical equipment, and the stubborn refusal to let violence be the thing that defined her ending. Outside, spring had fully arrived in Zurich. Trees bloomed. People sat at outdoor cafes drinking coffee and pretending the world was simple. Lucien and Adriana walked along the river without destination, just movement. She's right, Lucien said eventually, about figuring out what we want. Any ideas? Not one. Same. They walked further. The city spread around them, clean, efficient, indifferent to their damage. The estate on Lake Como, Lucien said, the one where I brought you that first night. It's still standing, still mine technically, though ownership is being transferred. I could delay the transfer, keep it. It's large enough to disappear inside, quiet, beautiful, if you care about that sort of thing. You're asking if I want to hide in a villa with you? I'm suggesting that two people who don't know what they want might figure it out better together than alone. Adriana stopped walking, looked at him, at the man who'd kidnapped her, threatened her, dragged her through war, then chosen mercy when vengeance would have been easier. What are we? She asked. What is this? I don't know. Survivor's bond, shared trauma, two people who've seen each other at their worst and somehow didn't run. I don't have clean answers. I don't need clean, I need honest. Lucien met her eyes. Honestly? I think about you constantly. About the way you knelt in that ballroom to help a stranger. About how you decoded your father's secrets without breaking. About the moment you rang that bell and saved my life. I think about whether someone who's done what I've done deserves anything good. And I think about whether you'd be better off if I disappeared and let you start over without me complicating things. And what conclusion do you reach? That I'm selfish enough to hope you choose to stay anyway. Adriana's chest tightened. I'm not easy. I'm damaged. I have nightmares about the chapel, about Nico dying, about Marco's smile. I wake up thinking I'm still in that SUV with windows exploding. I'm not going to magically heal because the war's over. Neither am I. I see my brother's face every time I close my eyes. I hear DeLuca's voice. I wonder if I'm actually different from my father or just better at lying to myself. I'm not offering you healing. I'm offering you company while we both figure out how to survive what we've become. That's the saddest proposal I've ever heard. It's the only honest one I have. Adriana laughed. It surprised her, felt strange in her throat, like her body had forgotten how. Okay, she said. Okay? Lake Como. We'll go there, figure out what living looks like when you're not running or fighting or dying. Maybe it'll work. Maybe we'll drive each other insane, but at least we'll know we tried. Something in Lucien's face shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Okay, he echoed. They took a train to Milan the next morning, then a car to Lake Como. The estate appeared exactly as Adriana remembered. Ancient stone, terraced gardens, views that made breathing feel like privilege. But it was different too. Quieter. The guards were gone. The bullet holes had been repaired. The air didn't carry the metallic tang of fear anymore. Inside, the restoration workshop remained untouched. Adriana stood in the doorway, looking at tools her father had used. Paintings he'd altered, evidence of years spent compromising principle for survival. We should burn it, she said. Why? Because it's evidence of his worst, of what he was forced to become. He died trying to escape this. The least I can do is make sure it doesn't haunt what's left. Lucien nodded. Then burn it. They spent the afternoon clearing the workshop, carried paintings outside, stacked tools, gathered decades of hidden compartments and false provenance and beautiful lies. When everything was assembled, Adriana struck a match. The fire caught slowly, then faster. Flames consumed wood and canvas and varnish. Smoke rose black against the afternoon sky. She watched her father's secret work turn to ash and felt something inside her chest loosen. Not forgiveness, not closure, just release. Lucienne stood beside her, didn't touch her, didn't offer empty words, just existed in the same space while they both watched the past burn. When the fire finally died, Adriana turned toward the villa. "I'm going to restore the damaged Madonna," she said. "The one that survived the chapel, the one with the cracked core. I want to fix it properly, not hide things inside it, just restore it the way it was meant to be." "Why?" "Because that's who my father was before everything else. A restorer. Someone who fixed broken, beautiful things. I want to remember that part, honor that part. Let that be what defines him in the end." She spent the next 3 months working on the painting in a sunlit room overlooking the lake. Lucien watched sometimes, learned about technique and pigment and the painstaking care required to repair damage without destroying integrity. Other times, he disappeared for days, meeting with lawyers, coordinating testimony, ensuring Celine had everything she needed to dismantle what remained of his father's empire. They existed in parallel, two people learning how to occupy space without weaponizing it. Slowly, something resembling peace settled over the estate. Adriana's nightmares decreased. Lucien's silences grew less haunted. They learned each other's damage, learned where to push and where to give space, learned that healing wasn't linear, but it was possible. One evening in late summer, Adriana finished the Madonna restoration. The painting glowed under examination lights. The crack was invisible now. The gold leaf perfect. The Madonna's face serene despite everything it had witnessed. Lucien stood beside her, studying the work. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "It's whole. That's different than beautiful." "Is it?" "Beautiful is easy. Whole requires surviving the breaking." She stepped back, looked at the painting, at 6 months of careful work, at her father's techniques applied to healing instead of hiding. "I'm done," she said. "With the painting?" "With running from what happened, with letting the war define every moment, with believing that broken means finished." She turned to face him. "I'm done pretending I don't want this, whatever this is. You, here, see, the possibility that two people damaged by the same violence might actually build something worth keeping." Lucien's expression was unreadable. "That sounds suspiciously like hope." "Maybe it is." "Hope is dangerous. So is everything else. At least hope doesn't require ammunition." He smiled, actual smile, small and real, and the most human thing she'd seen on his face since the ballroom. "Then hope it is." He pulled something from his pocket. A ring, old, simple silver, no diamonds, no ostentation, just metal worn smooth by generations. "This was my mother's," he said. "She died when I was young, before my father turned into what he became, before the empire consumed everything. She was kind, gentle, everything he wasn't. I kept this because it reminded me that goodness existed in my family once, that we weren't always monsters." He held it out. "I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet, maybe not ever. I'm asking if you want to try, if you want to stay, if you want to see what we become when we're not just surviving." Adriana looked at the ring, at Lucien, at the restored painting, and the lake beyond the windows, and the life they'd somehow carved from wreckage. "Yes," she said. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting. They stood in the workshop while evening light turned the lake to molten gold. Outside, the world continued. DeLuca's trials dominated headlines. Arrests multiplied. The network her father died exposing collapsed spectacularly and publicly. But inside the villa, two people who'd been weapons learned how to be human again. It wasn't easy. Some nights, Adriana woke screaming. Some nights, Lucien disappeared into silence so deep she couldn't reach him. They fought. They broke. They hurt each other with the same precision they'd used to survive. But they stayed. That was the difference. They chose each other again and again, even when easier options existed, even when distance would have been simpler, even when inherited damage made love feel impossible. They chose anyway. 6 months later, Celine visited. She arrived looking healthy, rested. Her shoulder had healed. Her testimony had concluded. 73 people had been indicted because of evidence she provided. The trials would continue for years, but her part was finished. "You look different," she told them over dinner on the terrace. "Different how?" Lucian asked. "Lighter, like you're not carrying corpses anymore." "We still carry them. We just learned how to set them down sometimes." Celine smiled. "That's all any of us can do." She stayed 3 days, told them about her plans, a small house in Portugal, writing a book about organized crime from the inside, maybe consulting for international prosecutors. A life built on truth instead of secrets. When she left, she hugged Adriana tightly. "Your father would be proud," Celine whispered, "of what you finished, of who you became, of choosing life over vengeance." "How do you know?" "Because I watched him those last 2 years. Watched him plan this. He wasn't trying to destroy empires for revenge. He was trying to make sure you had a world worth living in. Mission accomplished." She pulled back. Her eyes were bright. "Be happy. Actually happy. That's the real victory. Not the arrests or the collapsed networks. Just you, living. That's what he wanted." Then she was gone. Adriana stood on the terrace watching Celine's car disappear down the mountain road. Lucien appeared beside her, his hand finding hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That my father spent 7 years enabling evil, 2 years trying to fix it, and died hoping someone would finish what he started. And that I did. I actually did. The network is broken. The evidence exposed. Justice is happening. He won." "You both won." "Maybe." They stood together as the sun set over Lake Como. The water reflected fire. The mountains turned purple. Beauty insisted on existing despite everything. "I love you," Lucian said quietly. "I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, if it's too fast or too damaged or too complicated, but it's true. I love you." Adriana's throat tightened. "I love you too, even though you kidnapped me, even though you're responsible for the worst months of my life, even though loving you is probably Stockholm Syndrome or trauma bonding or some psychological catastrophe. I love you anyway. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Your standards are tragically low, or perfectly calibrated to reality." She laughed, turned, kissed him, while the sunset burned and the world continued and the past finally loosened its grip. They didn't marry for another year. When they did, it was small, private. Just them and Celine and Richard Castellano, who'd flown from Milan to give Adriana away because her father couldn't. The ceremony happened in the villa's garden. No crowd, no spectacle. Just vows exchanged under cypress trees with the lake as witness. Adriana wore cream silk, simple, elegant, nothing like the borrowed dress from the auction. Lucien wore black, always black, but his eyes were lighter than she'd ever seen them. When Richard placed her hand in Lucien's, he leaned close. "Your father told me once that the measure of a man wasn't the mistakes he made, but what he did after recognizing them. He'd look at you now, at what you've built, at who you've become, and know he succeeded. Not despite his mistakes, because of what you did with them." Adriana's vision blurred. "Thank you," she whispered. The ceremony concluded. They signed papers that meant nothing and everything, became legally bound in ways that felt less significant than the choice they'd already made months ago. To stay, to try, to love despite and because of the damage. The reception was dinner on the terrace, wine from local vineyards, food prepared by a chef who asked no questions, conversation that wandered from restoration techniques to legal battles to whether Portugal was actually as beautiful as Celine claimed. When the sun set, they lit candles. Celine raised her glass. To surviving, to finishing what others started, to choosing life over legacy, and to 2 people who proved that even monsters can learn mercy if they want it badly enough. "I'm not sure that's the toast you think it is," Lucien said. "It's the one you deserve. Drink." They drank. Later, after Celine and Richard had left, after the candles had burned low, Adriana and Lucien stood at the terrace railing looking out over dark water. "Do you think it's actually over?" Adriana asked. "Or are we just pretending?" "Does it matter?" It might. Lucien was quiet for a moment. I think wars end when people choose to stop fighting. DeLuca's dead, the network's broken, the evidence is public. We could spend the rest of our lives waiting for the next threat. Or we could decide that this, right here, right now, is the ending we fought for. That simple? Nothing's ever simple, but sometimes it's exactly that clear. Adriana leaned against him, felt his heartbeat, steady, human. Oh. Then it's over, she said. We choose that it's over. Agreed. They stood together as the lake reflected stars and the mountains held their ancient silence, and the world proved indifferent to their decisions. But that indifference was freedom. No one was hunting them. No one was threatening. No empires demanded loyalty. No inherited wars required participation. They were just two people who'd survived impossible things and chosen each other anyway. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The months became years. Adriana established a small restoration studio in the villa. She worked on damaged pieces from museums that needed discretion. Her reputation grew quietly among institutions that valued expertise over questions. She never hid evidence again, just fixed what was broken and returned it to wholeness. Lucien transformed the estate into a legitimate business, a retreat center for artists and writers who needed space to create. He funded it with money that had been cleaned through so many legal channels it no longer carried the stench of its origins. He never touched criminal enterprise again, just built something that added value instead of extracting it. They lived quietly. Some days were hard. Some nights the nightmares returned. Some moments the past reached forward and reminded them that damage didn't heal completely. But they learned to carry it together. Learned that love wasn't the absence of damage. It was the choice to hold each other while the damage did its work. 3 years after the chapel, Adriana discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified her. She thought about her father, about Giovanni Belmire losing his wife and raising a daughter alone while compromising everything to keep her safe, about the impossible choices parenthood demanded. I don't know if I can do this, she told Lucien. What if I'm like him? What if I make the same mistakes? What if our child inherits this damage and we can't protect them from it? Lucien took her hands. Your father made choices under threat, under violence, under circumstances that would break anyone. We're not him. We're not living that life. Our child won't grow up surrounded by empires and war. They'll grow up here, safe, loved, free to choose their own path. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise to try, to be different than my father was, to choose mercy over power, to teach them that mistakes don't define you. What you do after recognizing them does. Adriana pressed her hand against her stomach, felt the impossible weight of potential. What if they ask about my past? About yours? About what we did? We tell them the truth, that we survived something terrible, that we made choices we're not proud of, that we tried to fix what we could and learned to live with what we couldn't. That's not a perfect origin story, but it's an honest one. She looked at him, at the man who'd been a monster and learned humanity, at the scars that marked his face and the light that had slowly returned to his eyes. Okay, she whispered. We try. Their daughter was born in early spring. They named her Isabella, after Lucien's sister, after the child whose death had started the war and whose memory had ended it. Isabella Belmire Moretti, a name carrying weight from both sides. Damage and redemption woven together like threads in silk. She had Adriana's dark eyes and Lucien's sharp features. She cried loudly and slept poorly and demanded attention with the tyranny of the newly born. And she was perfect. Holding her for the first time, Adriana understood what her father had felt. The crushing responsibility, the terrifying love, the knowledge that this small human could unmake you completely if anything happened to them. I get it now, she told Lucien. Why he did what he did, why he chose the way he chose. I'd do anything to protect her. Absolutely anything. I know, so would I, but we won't have to. That's the difference. She gets to grow up without war. He was right. Isabella grew up in gardens and sunlight. She learned to paint from her mother, learned languages from tutors, learned that the world was larger and kinder than the one her parents had survived. On her 9th birthday, the same age Lucien's sister had been when she died, they took her to the restored chapel. It had been rebuilt, consecrated, turned into a museum documenting organized crime's collapse in northern Italy. The bell tower remained, but now it housed archives instead of hiding violence. They showed Isabella her grandfather's ledgers, showed her the evidence that had destroyed empires, showed her the photograph of the young conservator who'd chosen bravery too late but chosen it anyway. He made mistakes, Adriana said, big ones that hurt people, but at the end, he tried to fix them. That doesn't erase the damage, but it means something. It means change is possible. Isabella studied the photograph with serious eyes. Was he a good person? He was a complicated person. He did bad things for what he thought were good reasons. Then he tried to do good things knowing they'd cost him everything. I don't know if that makes him good, but it makes him human. And my other grandfather? Lucien knelt beside her. My father was a monster. He hurt people, killed people, built power on suffering. I loved him because he was my father, but I won't lie about what he was, or what I almost became because of him. But you didn't. No, I chose differently. Because of your mother. Because of people who showed me mercy when I didn't deserve it. Because choosing to be different is always possible, even when it's hard. Isabella absorbed this quietly. Then she looked up at the bell tower. Can I ring it? Adriana and Lucien exchanged glances. Why? Adriana asked. Because that's what saved you. When everything was bad and people were dying, Mama rang the bell and it changed things. I want to ring it too, for the people who died, for the people who survived, for all of it. They climbed the tower together. At the top, with the valley spread below and the sky endless above, Isabella pulled the rope. The bell sang. Its voice carried across the hills, deep, resonant, mourning and celebrating and announcing that life continued despite everything. Adriana listened to her daughter ring the bell and felt something inside her chest finally settle. Not healing, not forgiveness, not any clean emotion, just peace. The knowledge that her father's sacrifice mattered, that the war had ended, that the next generation would inherit stories instead of trauma. That was enough. That was everything. They descended the tower as the bell's voice faded. Drove back to Lake Como, had dinner on the terrace while Isabella told them about school and friends and dreams that had nothing to do with empires or violence. After she went to bed, Adriana and Lucien stood at the railing looking out over dark water. We did it, Adriana said quietly. We actually survived, built something, gave her a childhood that isn't defined by war. Your father would be proud. Yours wouldn't. Good. Fuck him. Adriana laughed. After all these years, Lucien could still surprise her, still make her laugh despite everything. I love you, she said. I love you too. Even though I'm damaged? Because you're damaged, because you survived it, because you chose mercy in a ballroom full of predators, and it saved both of us. She turned to face him. Gray touched his temples now, lines marked his face, but his eyes were clear, light, free. Do you ever regret it? She asked. The choices we made, the people we lost, the damage we carry? Every day. But I don't regret where we ended up. Don't regret you. Don't regret her. The cost was high, but the alternative was worse. What alternative? Dying without knowing that change was possible, that monsters could choose mercy, that love could exist in the ruins. He pulled her close. We proved it's possible. That's not nothing. No, Adriana agreed. It's everything. They stood together as the lake reflected moonlight, and the mountains held their silence, and their daughter slept safe inside walls that had once witnessed war, but now sheltered peace. The past didn't disappear, didn't stop hurting, didn't become simple or clean or easy to carry, but it became survivable. And that, finally, impossibly, miraculously, was enough. Years later, when Adriana was older and her daughter was grown and the world had moved on from scandals that once dominated headlines, she returned to the chapel one final time. Alone. She climbed the bell tower slowly. Her joints ached now. Age had caught up with all the ways violence had marked her body. At the top, she looked out over the valley. The same view, the same sky. The same wind that had carried smoke and screams and the sound of a bell that changed everything. She pulled a photograph from her pocket. Her father. Young. Smiling. Holding a paintbrush like it was salvation. I finished it, she said to the wind. Everything you started. The evidence exposed. The empire's destroyed. Justice served. Your granddaughter is safe, happy, free. You won, Papa, despite everything, despite the compromises and the mistakes and the poison that killed you. You won. She pressed the photograph against her chest. I forgive you for the secrets, for the danger, for dying without explaining. I forgive you because I understand now. Because I have a daughter too. Because I know what it means to choose survival over principle when the people you love are threatened. I forgive you, and I hope, wherever you are, if you're anywhere, that you've forgiven yourself. The wind carried her words across the valley. No answer came. Just silence and the knowledge that she'd said what needed saying. She descended the tower for the last time, drove back to the villa, found Lucien waiting on the terrace with wine and the comfortable silence of people who'd survived impossible things together. Did you find what you were looking for? He asked. I think so. What was it? Permission to let go, to stop carrying his ghost, to accept that I finished what he started and the rest is just living. Can you do that? I can try. They sat together as evening turned to night. Inside, Isabella's daughter, their granddaughter, practiced piano. The notes drifted through open windows. Imperfect, beautiful, proof that life continued. Adriana leaned against Lucien and let the music wash over her. The girl who'd knelt in broken glass was gone. The woman who'd survived war was fading. What remained was simpler. Someone who'd made mistakes and fixed what she could and learned to live with what she couldn't. Someone who'd chosen mercy in a ballroom full of monsters. And that choice, that single, impossible, reckless choice, had saved everything. It was enough. More than enough. It was the only thing that mattered. The night deepened. The lake turned black. Stars emerged one by one. And two people who'd been weapons learned how to be nothing more dangerous than human. Together. Finally. Forever.